owner of the US Mega Farmest video is Puremont para Intratnamiento Wino Infringe de Recos de Originales. Los Direcos de la Novela y la Imagen son del otro original, no reclamamos propiedad. No te gusta esperar y quieres escuchar este fanfic completo ahora? Suscríbete a nuestro Patreon, donde encontrarás los mejores fanfics. Chapter 776 On the Plane Rumble. Accompanied by the roar of the engine, a silver-white Airbus 747 slowly began to taxi on the runway. Uncle, is America fun? Tongton, who was wrapped in the seat with a seatbelt, opened her cute big eyes and twisted her body, trying hard to look out through the window of the plane. Before Kim-Yu spoke, Kim-Won, who was sitting in front of him, turned her head. Although it was her first time to take a plane, she knew what to pay attention to when the plane took off, so she said to the dishonest little girl with a serious face, "Be good, don't move around, wait until the plane takes off." "Oh, okay." Seeing her mother's serious face, the little girl reluctantly calmed down and leaned quietly on the seat without moving around. Kim-Yu smiled, retracted his gaze from a distance, and turned to look at his cute little niece beside him. He rolled his eyes and said with a smile, "Tongton, of course America is fun. Not only are there delicious food, but there are also ponies to ride. You'll stay there to accompany your uncle in the future, okay?" This. The little girl obviously hesitated for a moment, turned her head to look at her mother, thought about the delicious food and the pony, and became a little hesitant. After a moment, it seemed that she had thought it through. She resisted the temptation of her bad uncle and said decisively, "No, I want to go home to accompany my mother. My mother will miss me." "How could that be?" Kim-Yu didn't care at all. He smiled and pointed at Lady Lei in front of him, and said seriously, "Your mother has a younger brother, how could she miss you?" After Kim-Yu said this, Tongton was obviously a little confused. Looking ahead, her mother was talking to her younger brother with a pleasant face. And she thought of her mother's serious face scolding her just now, and she was immediately confused. The little girl, whose thoughts had been completely distorted by her bad uncle, felt more and more that her mother didn't like her. For a moment, the little girl's eyes were a little red, and big golden beans began to accumulate in her eye sockets. Now, Kim-Yu was a little flustered. What happened? Wasn't it just a joke? Why such a big reaction? He didn't know that the little girl's sensitive thoughts were distorted by him. Seeing that the little girl's mouth was drooping and she seemed to be really about to cry, he hurriedly comforted her. "Okay, Tongton, don't cry, Uncle is just joking with you." It would have been better if he didn't say it. After Kim-Yu said this, Tongton's eyes became even redder, and her little nose twitched, and she was about to cry. Scratching his head, Kim-Yu was a little at a loss. How could he know that this little girl was so easy to tease? Fortunately, the plane began to accelerate at this time, and the sudden impact temporarily diverted the little girl's attention. "Uncle, I feel so uncomfortable." The little girl, who was taking a plane for the first time, obviously felt a little uncomfortable, and tears fell from her eyes instantly. Seeing this, Kim-Yu quickly took out a tissue to help the little girl wipe away the tears from her eyes, and stuffed a piece of chewing gum into her hand, comforting her. "Good boy, Tongton, you will feel better after chewing for a few times." Hearing Kim-Yu's words, the little girl subconsciously opened her mouth and felt that there was something extra in her mouth, so she chewed it. Maybe the chewing gum worked, or maybe the little girl herself had adapted to it. After chewing for a while, she finally felt less uncomfortable. It was not until the plane rushed into the clouds and began normal navigation that Kim-Yu bent over and helped the little girl unbuckle her seatbelt. "How is it? Are you still feeling bad?" Tongton shook her head to show that she was not feeling bad anymore, then she struggled to run down, got into her mother's arms and said in a crying voice, "Mom, I don't want to stay in the United States with my uncle, I want to go back with you." Kim-Won was a little puzzled, but seeing that her little baby was about to cry, she hurried to comfort her. In response, Kim-Yu could only shrug helplessly. It seemed that the little girl was really scared by him. It was not until the little girl finally stopped crying under the comfort of her sister that Kim-Yu's eyes moved away from her and once again cast on the beautiful figure not far away. After staying in Beijing for a week, Kim-Yu returned to his hometown before the Lantern Festival. To his surprise, Zhu Mengyo did not continue to stay at home with her family, but chose to go back with him. However, thinking about the meeting that day, he felt relieved again. Both parents have their own things to do, and the holidays are the busiest time for the company. "I don't know where to celebrate, so how can I spend the holidays with her?" Besides, even if they have time, they have to go home to accompany the old man. And Zhu Mengyo is the kind of person who is not favored at home. She will feel depressed if she goes to such family gatherings, so it is better not to go. So, she went back to her hometown with Qin Zhu again. However, this is also thanks to Qin Zhu's recognition of her parents. Otherwise, the daughter of the Zhu family, even if she is not favored, will not go home with anyone before getting married. In fact, Qin Zhu underestimated himself too much. He is now a rich man after all, with a net worth of more than 1 billion. Although it may not be a big deal in China, it is different if it is converted into US dollars. Although he has not yet reached the level of being on par with the Zhu family, he is qualified enough to marry the daughter of the Zhu family. After returning home and spending a happy lantern festival with his family, Qin Zhu's passport and visa that he asked someone to apply for before the new year were all approved. So, Qin Zhu rushed to Beijing with his family. After getting off the high-speed train, several people did not fly directly to the United States, but stayed in a hotel. Because the younger sister Qinru was very curious about the capital of her country, and after she went to the United States, it would be inconvenient for her to come back. So, everyone decided to play in Beijing for 2 days first. The Summer Palace, the Forbidden City, the Parade Square, the Great Wall. Those internationally renowned attractions have all left traces of several people. It was not until this time that Qin Zhu figured out the little girl's thoughts. It turned out that this girl was afraid that after going abroad, other classmates would ask her that she had not even been to these famous attractions and embarrassed her. Well, this is indeed a reason. She didn't even go to the famous attractions in her own country, but went abroad. She stayed in Beijing for 3 days, until the early morning of the 4th day, when several people boarded a plane to New York, USA. What's wrong with you? Did you make the little girl angry again? At the little girl's strong request, the beautiful Zhu changed seats with her and sat next to Qin Zhu, teasing with a smile on her face. Qin Zhu's thoughts were pulled back to reality. After he came to his senses, he shrugged helplessly. How would I know that girl would get angry so easily? She usually looks very generous. Zhu Mengyo glanced at Tongton in the seat in front of her, her beautiful eyes blinking curiously. What did you say? I saw the little girl almost cried. Qin Zhu couldn't help but twitched his mouth when he heard it, and laughed dryly. I didn't say anything, I just said that her mother didn't want her anymore, and let her stay in the United States with me later. Zhu Mengyo was silent for a while after hearing this, and after a long time, she said in a low voice, I'm sorry. Her. Now it was Qin Zhu's turn to be a little confused. He turned his head to look at the beautiful Zhu with red eyes beside him, and his heart was like 10,000 beasts galloping through. What's going on? Chapter 777 Return to America. I'm sorry, I can't give you a baby. Zhu Mengyo snuggled into Qin Zhu's arms, and said with a sob. She knew that Qin Zhu liked children very much. This can be seen from his previous attitude towards Shirley, and his love for Tongton and Lily. But what about her? She couldn't fulfill this most basic obligation. Yes, in Zhu Mengyo's view, having children is her obligation. Isn't it the due obligation and responsibility for a woman to help a man have children and pass on the family line? It wasn't until the beautiful Zhu snuggled into his arms that Qin Zhu reacted. While he was a little amused, he also felt a little more pity in his heart. Silly, I've said that I can definitely cure your illness, what are you still worried about? It's impossible, don't comfort me. Shaking her head in Qin Zhu's arms, Zhu Mengyo said with a choked voice. Whether it's Chinese medicine or Western medicine, I've seen them all over the years, and it's useless. Qin Zhu was helpless. He couldn't say that I was an alien product and different from the ones on Earth, right? Moreover, Qin Zhu did not want to give her the spiritual liquid right now. First, he was not sure if there would be any sequelae after using the spiritual liquid, and wanted to wait and observe the bodyguard's conditions. Second, he was even more uncertain whether the spiritual liquid could completely cure infertility. If the condition could not be cured after using it, the blow to Zhu Mengyo would probably be greater than not using it. So, for now, he thought it would be better to leave a glimmer of hope. Thinking of this, he lowered his head and whispered to Zhu Mengyo about the bodyguard's conditions. What did you say? Zhu Mengyo raised her head in astonishment, and her beautiful crescent-shaped eyes were filled with an incredible look. Is this true? She asked again with some uncertainty. Qin Zhu nodded, stroking her hair lovingly. Of course it's true. If you don't believe me, you can ask the bodyguards. Is this true? She murmured to herself for a few times, then raised her head again and asked nervously, "Husband, so you can really cure my body?" "I definitely can," Kinzu said firmly. "That's great, it's really great." In excitement, the beautiful Yu's pink lips came up directly, and she kissed her beloved man, the man who gave her countless surprises, fiercely. "Shame on you, uncle is not shy." Just when the two of them were a little selfless because of the intense entanglement, a childish voice suddenly sounded in their ears. "Ah, no, don't." The frightened beautiful Yu almost bit off the dishonest tongue in her mouth. After pushing away the somewhat unyielding Kinzu, Zumengyo covered her hot cheeks and refused to look up. Kinzu licked his lips with a sense of satisfaction, and glared at the little girl with some dissatisfaction. "What do you know, little brat? Go cool down." "Humph, bad uncle, thick skin." The little girl, who was just fooled by Kinzu and cried, would not give him face at this time. She hid in her mother's arms and made faces at him. Kinzu was angry and pretended to get up. The little girl screamed in fear and quickly buried her head in her mother's arms and hid. "Okay, don't scare her." After a rest, Zumengyo, who had regained her composure, raised her head and smiled and teased, "If you do this again, be careful that she won't play with you when you go back." Kinzu stretched out his hand to hold the beautiful woman's slender waist and raised his eyebrows proudly. "If she dares to ignore me, I won't let her ride the pony, only Lady Leia will ride it." As soon as the voice fell, Tongton, who had just been hiding in her mother's arms and refused to get up, immediately refused. Uncle is the best. Tongton wants to ride a pony." Qinwan looked at her daughter with a bit of a smile. "Do you have to be so shameless?" At this time, the little sister sitting on the other side also ran over to join in the fun. She stretched out her jade hand and gently twisted the little girl's chubby face, and asked with a smile, "Little Tongton, you are so easy to talk to. Uncle bought you the pony." "Huh?" Tongton blinked her cute big eyes, bit her lower lip and thought carefully for a while, and asked uncertainly, "Aunt, what should I do?" Tongton really wants to ride a pony. "Well, at least 2 horses are needed." Kinru gave advice seriously. Tongton heard it and thought it made sense, so she turned to look at Kinzu and said in a childish tone, pretending to be generous, "Did you hear that, uncle? Give Tongton 2 ponies, and Tongton will pay attention to you." They talked and laughed all the way, and time passed quickly. When they got off the plane in New York, it was still a few minutes before 8 o'clock in the morning. "Wow, there are so many blonde people." Following the crowd out of the terminal, the little girl chatted non-stop along the way, not at all tired from the long journey. Even her sister Qinwan and her brother-in-law Li Jianhua were like this. They each held a little kid and followed Kinzu's footsteps closely, fearing that they would get lost. But Kin's father and mother, after all, were old and a little tired after sitting on the plane for such a long time. At this time, they were supported by Kinzu and Zumengyo to walk out. "It's okay, shucks you, let go, I can walk by myself." After a while of adapting, Kin's father pushed away Kinzu's hand that was supporting him and followed the crowd to walk forward. Kin's mother, who was next to her, was supported by her daughter and future daughter-in-law. In addition, she came to the United States again, and she felt so happy when she saw the endless stream of foreigners around. She now felt that life was becoming more and more meaningful. Compared with the days when she got up early and worked late in the fields and earned little money, it was much better. Especially her future daughter-in-law. Mother Qin couldn't help but look at the beautiful Zhu next to her. She could never have imagined that the family of her future daughter-in-law was so powerful. Her future-in-laws could often appear on TV. What made Mother Qin even more incredible was that her son not only hooked up with such a white, rich and beautiful woman, but also her family agreed. Thinking about it, Mother Qin couldn't help but smile a few times. He was worthy of being her son. "Mom, what are you laughing at? I'm not going back, are you so happy?" Kinru, who was standing aside, couldn't help but laugh and tease when she saw her mother so happy. Of course. Mother Qin ignored her daughter's resentful look and nodded as a matter of course. In the future, you don't have to cook for one more person, and you don't have to wash one more person's clothes. How great. Now, the little girl who was smiling just now suddenly turned into a bitter face. "Brother, look at Mom, she bullies me." Unable to convince her mother, the little girl changed her position and ran to her brother to act like a spoiled child. Kinzu had no intention of helping her, but teased her. "Little sister, isn't it normal for Mom to bully you?" "Humph, brother, you bully me too, I don't want to play with you anymore." There was no way. The little girl who had suffered so much grievance hid beside the beautiful Zhu. She knew that her sister-in-law would definitely not bully her. Sure enough, after Kinru hid away, the beautiful Zhu spoke immediately. Okay, you only know how to bully your little sister. Have you called Dale and the others? Where should we wait for them? Thank you for the 999 book coins reward from Fat Guy, and thank you for the 200 book coins reward from Bitter and Insufferable. Thank you. Si est escuchando esta novela en un canal distinto a mundo fanfic novelas, significat lo descarga and y subir en sinisfuerzos invitamos cordialmente a visitar nuestro canal. Mundo fanfic novelas all encontras la versión original de esta historia y podrás explorar muchas otras novelas de diversos narradores. Te esperamos para sumergirte en un mundo de novelas incredibles. Chapter 778. First encounter with the helicopter. The phone was connected, and Dale's familiar voice came over. Boss, are you here? Kinzu responded, walked a little, and asked, where are you? I'm out. Look ahead, boss, we've seen you. Listening to the voice on the phone, Kinzu subconsciously looked up, and sure enough, he saw two graceful figures in the crowd of people waiting for the airport. Following the two girls, the group walked through the airport and came to the apron on the other side. Kinzu saw the helicopter that belonged to him at a glance. This is. Looking at the huge helicopter in front of them, which was shining with metallic luster and had an unknown big bird pattern on the fuselage. Except for Kinzu and Zumengyo, everyone else fell into a daze. Even Tongton and Lily, the two little ones, opened their mouths slightly at this moment, with an expression as if they had seen an alien. Wow, brother, you are so handsome. What Kinzu didn't expect was that Kinru, the little girl, actually reacted first, screamed, gave up her sister-in-law, and rushed over directly. This scream also made the remaining people react. Kin's father was the first to suppress his excitement and asked in a trembling voice, Xiaoxiu, is this yours? Kinzu nodded, his expression was indifferent, and he looked calm. However, only those who are familiar with him will find that the corners of this guy's mouth are almost grinning to his ears. Coincidentally, except for the two little girls who are still ignorant, the people here are all people who know him. So, this guy's arrogant look was seen by everyone. However, perhaps because they were shocked by the huge helicopter, no one cared about Kinzu's little thoughts. Xiaoxiu, this is a Black Hawk, right? After all, brother-in-law Li Jianhua knew a little about military affairs. He only took a first look and found the difference of this helicopter. Yes, Black Hawk, but it's a modified version. Kinzu replied with a smile. Li Jianhua was shocked when he heard this, and said with some emotion, Xiaoxiu is amazing. This is a military version. Even if it has been modified, it is not something that ordinary people can buy, right? Kinzu smiled, but did not respond. Instead, he pulled down his little sister who was clinging to him like a koala, and smiled and said, go up first, let's go back to the ranch. Everyone agreed, and walked into the cabin one by one at Kinzu's call. After everyone sat down, Kinzu closed the cabin door and nodded to Dale and Erica in the cockpit. But a huge engine sound came, which also scared several people in the cabin who had never touched a helicopter. Especially the little sister Kinru, although she was so excited just now, she was just cheering because her brother was capable. As for a helicopter, she has never ridden it before. The only impression is that those who have helicopters represent great abilities. Now that she is really sitting on the helicopter, she is still a little scared in her heart, and she has been holding Kinzu's arm and dare not let go. Especially after the plane took off, the swaying from side to side and the vague feeling of weightlessness scared the little girl. It's okay, little sister, don't worry, the plane is very safe. Seeing Kinru so nervous, the beautiful Zhu, who was sitting on the other side, comforted her in a soft voice. The soft voice seemed to have a kind of magic to the ears of the somewhat hesitant Kinru, which made people calm down involuntarily. Seeing this, Kinzu's eyes rolled around, and the corners of his mouth curved up, and he also said, little sister, don't worry, it is absolutely safe to take a plane now, but it is much more dangerous to take a car. Not long ago, I heard a report on the news that a guy was driving a car on the road safely, and suddenly a plane fell on his head. After the voice fell, the space was silent for 2 seconds, and suddenly the little sister burst out laughing. Hee, bad brother, you did it on purpose, didn't you? No way, I obviously didn't mean it, okay? Kinzu spread his hands, looking innocent. Humph, I know you want to scare me, but I'm not afraid. With a proud snort, Kinru pulled Zumengyo aside to chat. This girl has become smarter, Qin sighed with some regret. Zhu Mengyo took the time to give this guy a blank look, thinking about scaring children all day long. Qin accepted his wife's cold eyes calmly, and in return sent a flying kiss. Compared with the younger sister's nervousness, the elder sister and brother-in-law, who had experienced many small storms, and Qin's father and mother, all behaved calmly. In addition to his curiosity about the plane, Qin's father was purely proud of his son. While admiring, the brother-in-law was also curious about the large leather chair under him. "Xiaozu, what is the material of this chair? Why is it so comfortable to sit on?" Qin heard this, turned around and smiled. "I don't know what material it is specifically, it seems to be some kind of space cotton or something, but it feels really good to sit on it. Yes, it's very comfortable. It can move by itself." Li Jianhua twisted his body, feeling the soft touch of the leather seat, wondering if he should replace the car with this one when he goes back. "By the way, Xiaozu, how much is this chair? If it works, I will replace the car with this one." "This. Mengyo, do you still remember it?" Qin turned his head to look at Zhu Mengyo. He didn't remember it very clearly. "It seems to be more than 10,000. Zhu Mengyo didn't have much impression. She seemed to have heard Qin mention it casually. More than 10,000. Li Jianhua thought about it and felt that it seemed worth spending more than 10,000 to replace a seat for a Land Rover worth more than 1 million. "Yo, you are not talking about RMB, right? After all, women are more careful." After listening to Zhu Mengyo's words, Qin asked another question. "Yes, US dollars. We don't accept RMB here." Zhu Mengyo replied with a smile. His Li Jianhua took a breath and looked at Qin. They could see each other's surprise and shock. More than 10,000 US dollars, at least 80,000 or 90,000 RMB, right? Spending 80,000 or 90,000 just to change a seat in the car? Don't be kidding, he's not crazy. Or rather, he's not that rich. With the help of Qin, he can make a little money, and it's okay to be a small rich man in the county. But if it's such a luxury, he really can't afford it. Looking at the 7 or 8 seats in the cabin, Li Jianhua swallowed his saliva and finally understood what a real rich man is. More than 1 million RMB, the money that can buy a house in China, but here it can only be used to change a few chairs. Although it's only a few $100,000, it's still money, enough for the middle class to struggle for several years. The conversation between the three did not alarm others, and they did what they were supposed to do. The younger sister was chatting with Zhu Mengyo, and occasionally pointed at Qin, and the two of them burst into giggles. Qin's father and mother were looking out through the plane window at this moment. When they saw the endless ocean outside the plane, they couldn't help but sigh inwardly. "I gave birth to a good son." Extra update for the leader of riding a pig to the grassland, 16/20. Busy for more than half a month, busy in vain. Extra update continues, chapter 779. Arrival at the ranch. When the helicopter landed on the top of the ranch mansion, everyone was speechless. When they were in China, they were surprised to hear Qin introduce how big his ranch and fishery were, but they had never seen them in person. But when they entered the fishery, Qin reminded them that from here on, it was our sea area, and Qin's father and mother were speechless. 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 10 minutes had passed, but the plane was still flying. "Xiaozu, how big is our fishery?" After getting off the helicopter, Qin's mother was supported by the beautiful Zhu and walked to Qin's side, and asked with a trembling voice. Well, this time she was really supported, and her legs were weak. Qin scratched his head. He really couldn't remember it very well. He said uncertainly, "It seems to be more than 600 or 700 square nautical miles. I can't remember it clearly." "That's so many." He nodded as if he understood. Mother Qin said worriedly, "Then, such a large area, the American devils will not take it back, right?" "Don't worry about that." Qin smiled and said very confidently, "Unless the United States disintegrates as a whole, otherwise our land will always belong to us." That's good, that's good." Mother Qin nodded repeatedly as if she had put down a huge stone in her heart. Finally, a smile appeared on her face again. At this time, Qin took care to introduce everyone. Pointing to the two people coming down from the cab, he smiled and said, "Dad, Mom, these two are my bodyguards, Dale and Erica." Then, he introduced Dale and Erica in English. To Qin's surprise, as soon as he finished speaking, Dale and Erica greeted him in somewhat broken Chinese. "Hello, Master, hello, Madam." Instantly, the surroundings fell into silence. Qin's father and mother stood there at a loss, not knowing how to respond, and not knowing how to respond was not good either. Finally, Wan couldn't stand it anymore, and hurriedly said to the two girls with a smile, "Dale and Erica, right? Just call them uncle and aunt, don't make it sound like the old society." Yes, just call them uncle and aunt." Keen's father and mother also nodded repeatedly. They felt uncomfortable being called master and madam. When the two girls heard this, although they were a little curious about what the old society was, they still didn't ask, but looked at Kinzu at the same time. It was not until he nodded slightly that they smiled sweetly and called out, "Hello, uncle and aunt." Keen's father and mother also responded with a smile, and the group walked downstairs. Kinzu walked in the front, followed by Dale. Zumengyo supported Keen's mother and walked in the middle. Erica stayed at the end. Looking at the female bodyguard who swayed as she walked and had a waist as thin as a model, he asked with some sweat on his head, "Dale, who told you to call me like that?" "What?" Seeing the reactions of several people, Dale knew that the two of them had made a mistake and pretended to be stupid. Not only did she not admit it, she also pretended to be confused and looked at Kinzu, as if she really didn't know what he was talking about. Kinzu narrowed his eyes and rubbed his right hand subconsciously, as if he was a little itchy. Dale was startled by this and almost couldn't help jumping away. She was really afraid that Kinzu would slap her right here. It's a TV show he watched, and they all call each other like this. The elders in the family are called old masters, and the younger ones are called young masters. Dale looked innocent, although she had already blamed her sister in her heart. It was all because of this girl. In order to understand the habits of the Chinese people, she had to find those Chinese movies to watch. As a result, this is the result. Kinzu didn't know what she was thinking. After hearing this reason, the corners of his mouth couldn't help but twitch. However, thinking that she would watch TV to study these things for him, he was inexplicably moved. As for how these two girls knew Chinese, Kinzu could only say that he had forgotten their previous occupations. At this time, Eva, who was waiting in a garden on the second floor, saw several people coming out and strode up to greet them. However, before she could speak, she was grabbed by Dale. After the two girls talked for a while, Eva came up with a slightly red face. Kinzu breathed a sigh of relief and introduced several people with a smile. "Dad, Mom, this is my friend Eva, she's at the ranch." Kinzu was suddenly a little stuck when he introduced her here. Yes, what is Eva doing at the ranch now? Nanny. This is definitely not the right way to introduce her. Cowboy. That doesn't seem appropriate either. Ranch manager? Not yet. Just when Kinzu was struggling, Zumengyo next to him suddenly said, "Auntie, Eva is now at the ranch learning from the manager. She is the candidate for the next manager of our ranch." Oh? King's father didn't understand the meaning of the words, but asked curiously, "The current manager of the ranch made a mistake. How come the next manager has come out?" Kinzu also reacted at this time, and took back the words with a wry smile. "Dad, it's like this. The ranch manager is old and not in good health. But because he has made great contributions to the ranch, he is allowed to stay in the ranch manager position for a few more days." King's father nodded in understanding, greeted Eva enthusiastically, and continued to walk downstairs under the leadership of Kinzu. It was King's mother and Wan, the two women who were more careful, who seemed to have discovered something. Although their footsteps did not stop, their eyes were always intentionally or unintentionally scanning Eva and Dale, the big foreign horses. On the second floor, Kinzu opened all the doors of the empty rooms and said with a smile, "Dad, Mom, Sister, these rooms are unoccupied, you can pick one by yourself." Before King's father and mother said anything, Kinru, who had always been like a follower, suddenly jumped out. I'll choose first, I want to choose the biggest room." "The biggest?" Kinzu couldn't help but teasing when he heard it. "My brother lives in the biggest room, why don't you live with me?" "Humph, I don't want to." With a delicate snort, Kinru couldn't wait to get into a room and began to look carefully. Seeing this, King's mother shook her head and smiled bitterly, saying, "This damn girl is getting more and more unruly." Zumengyo smiled and persuaded her, "Auntie, don't worry, I think Chiara has a good personality. As a child, it's better to be lively." But King's mother shook her head repeatedly, "It's not good to be too lively. If the girl can be as gentle and lovely as you when she grows up, I will be satisfied." Suddenly being praised by the mother of her sweetheart, a blush appeared on the fair face of the beautiful Zhu. Even the slight discomfort that had just arisen in her heart disappeared in an instant. Extra update for the leader who rode a pig to the grassland, 17/20, chapter 780 Zhu. Unfortunately, Kinzu still failed to ring Zumengyo. He cleaned her hastily, and then he helped the weak beauty downstairs. When they arrived in the living room, Qin's father and mother were curiously looking around. Qinwan and Li Jianhua followed the two little kids, Tongton and Lily, fearing that something might happen to them. Why were they so nervous? Because in front of them were the two huskies that they hadn't seen for a long time, as well as the big tiger and the little tiger that they hadn't seen for a long time. Uncle, is this really a tiger? Lily squatted carefully 2 or 3 meters away from the big tiger, curiously and nervously looking at the animal in front of him that could only be seen on TV. Of course, this is definitely a real tiger. Didn't you see how they look? Qinzu responded with a few words, and had to stop. Because many small animals suddenly appeared in front of him. Woof 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 or woo. Or woof woof woof. As soon as they saw Qinzu, the little guys who had been so aggressive just now immediately pounced on him. On the left was a big hectares, on the right was a small hectares, and in front was a big tiger. As for little Jerry, this guy quickly climbed onto Qinzu's shoulder and stood there. No one would compete with him for territory here. In the end, the remaining guys who didn't get a position all snuggled up to Qinzu and kept spinning around at his feet. This mood completely stunned Qin's father and mother. Even Qinwan and Li Jianhua were stunned, looking at the little animals around him. After being stunned for a while, Qinwan turned her head and looked at Li Jianhua beside her in astonishment, and asked uncertainly, Am I seeing clearly? Li Jianhua subconsciously rubbed his eyes and subconsciously replied, I think I am not seeing clearly. It's no wonder they were so surprised. Dahe and Xiaohe, Dahu and Xiao, Jerry and Xiaohong, and next to them there is Xiao Dadu who is looking around. If you add the white tiger and cheese, it can be a small zoo. And when they suddenly saw so many animals appear in front of them without knowing anything, you can imagine how surprised they were. Xiaoxiu, what's going on? Qin's mother looked at Qinzu in surprise and asked stutteringly, where did these things come from? If Qinzu hadn't been there, she would have really thought she had come to a zoo. Qinzu's mouth twitched. What's going on? He was also a little confused. He didn't feel it at ordinary times, but now he saw that there seemed to be too many little guys at home. Fortunately, at this time, these guys seemed to know that there was some trouble, and they all stopped. Be good, sit down. Qinzu took the opportunity to show the momentum of the master and let these guys separate by type and sit down. However, after lining up, Qinzu found that one seemed to be missing. After a careful look, Qinzu found that Betty seemed to be gone. Turning his head and looking at Zhu Mengyo, she also shook her head slightly. It seems that she also noticed that Betty was not there. Eva, where is Betty? Have you seen her? Eva, who was busy in the kitchen, heard this, poked her head out to take a look, and said uncertainly, if she is not here, she may be outside. This guy likes to bask in the sun now. Okay. Qinzu touched his nose. This is another uncle level. Shaking his head, after the little guys sat together in a row, he smiled and explained, Mom, you know, there are more forests and animals here, so I adopted a few more. How many? Qin's mother pointed at Dahe and Xiaohe, and said with a smile, is this the number you said? Is it less than 10, then it belongs to a few. Qinzu coughed twice, counted quietly, and then smiled and said, well, Mom, it's more than 10. Qin's mother heard the words, counted again, and then looked at Qinzu suspiciously. Are there any other places? Qinzu nodded awkwardly. White Tiger and Betty were still outside, and Cheese hadn't come back yet. If it was Ying Guang, there were also Haha and Pape. Qinzu's forehead was sweating coldly. Are there so many? At this time, the look in Qin's mother's eyes when she looked at her son was a little strange. I didn't realize that this kid liked animals so much before. How come his personality changed so much after coming to the United States? Could it be that fortunately, a child's voice interrupted her thoughts and awakened Qinzu from his deep thoughts? Uncle, are these really tigers? Why don't they look scary? Tongton squatted beside Lei and asked again with some uncertainty. Qinzu heard this and breathed a sigh of relief, and also found it funny. Little girl, why do you think tigers should be scary? Yes, Tongton nodded as a matter of course, stretched out her hands and gestured. I've seen it on TV, it's a big tiger, so scary. Is that so? Qinzu nodded thoughtfully, glanced at his mother, and saw that she was not angry, so he smiled and said, Little Tongton, Uncle will take you to see a big tiger, okay? Big tiger. Is it very big? Tongton looked over curiously. Yes, a very big tiger, just like the one on TV. Okay, let's go see the big tiger. The little girl stood up immediately, ran to her uncle, waiting for him to take her to see the big tiger. Keen's mother stood up again at this time, first looked at Keen's father, and then asked suspiciously, "What big tiger? Is it the tiger in your photo that day?" Touching his nose, Keen's smiled awkwardly and nodded in agreement. You, what can I say to you? Seeing Keen's nod, Keen's mother almost exploded, and pointed at Keen's with her finger, suppressing her anger. Can a tiger be kept? I forgot to mention you last time. If the thing goes crazy, will you still be alive? It seems that because she spoke too quickly, Keen's mother couldn't catch her breath and started coughing violently. Keen's didn't even need to say anything. Zhu Mengyu on the side quickly stepped forward to support her future mother-in-law and comforted her softly. Auntie, the tiger is very docile, and especially listens to Keen's obedient. Keen's mother obviously didn't believe it. She sighed and said, even if he is more obedient, what can he do? He can't communicate with each other like humans. What if he gets irritated one day? As she spoke, Keen's mother's gaze shifted to Keen's again, and she said unhappily, I'm too lazy to say anything to you now, you little bastard. Even if you don't consider yourself, you should think more about your oyo, right? Hearing Keen's mother directly calling Keen's a little bastard, Zhu Mengyu couldn't help but burst out laughing. Chapter 781 Tiger. Leopard. Although he complained repeatedly that Keen's shouldn't raise a tiger, Keen's father and mother, Keen Wan and Li Jianhua, were all curious about the big tiger they had only seen on TV. So, after discussing, Keen's led the way, and Keen Ru followed her brother, jumping and skipping outside the villa. Zhu Mengyu followed behind with Keen's father and mother, and her sister and brother-in-law also followed with a little kid in their arms. After leaving the villa, Keen's had no time to speak, and the white tiger and Betty, who were competing with the sun on the lawn not far away, had already stood up and looked over here with a vigilant look. Keen's knew that they were sensing the smell of strangers. Fearing that the two guys would suddenly jump up and scare their parents, he hurriedly calmed them down with his mind. Feeling Keen's comfort, the white tiger's eyes softened, and he shook his body lazily and slowly walked over here. Because the white tiger stood up too suddenly, everyone didn't react, and she had already come to several people. It was not until this time that the younger sister Keen Ru was the first to react. Feeling the white tiger swaying at her feet, her legs softened and she almost collapsed to the ground. Brother, what does it want to do? Hearing the trembling voice of the younger sister, Keen's hurriedly patted her back and comforted her with a smile. It's okay, it's just saying hello to you and familiar with your smell. After hearing what Keen's said, Keen Ru's little heart slowly settled down. Especially after seeing that the white tiger was just sniffing at her legs and didn't do anything else, her fearful mood just now became more and more calm at this time. And when her mood calmed down, it became curious and excited instead. God, when has she ever seen a tiger so close? No, it should be said that when has she ever seen a real tiger? She grew up in a small county town, but she has never even been to a zoo. Apart from seeing these spirits of nature on TV, when has she ever had the opportunity to get so close to them? Therefore, when the fear gradually dissipated, Keen Ru opened her big eyes and looked at them curiously. However, after a few glances, the little girl was a little confused. The tiger in front of her was different from the tiger she had seen on TV before. Not only that, this guy looked very similar to the leopard on TV. Did my brother make a mistake? This is actually a leopard? Touching her chin, Keen Ru looked at the white tiger thoughtfully, wondering if she should remind her brother later. Well, of course, it is necessary to laugh at his eyes. While the little girl was thinking about things, the white tiger had passed her and walked slowly towards the people behind. Seeing this, Keen Ru quickly turned around, looked at his parents and sister who were panicking, and explained with a wry smile. Dad, Mom, don't be nervous, this guy is getting familiar with the smell of you, there is no danger. Everyone saw the performance of the white tiger just now, so there was no need for Keen Ru to remind them, and everyone was already less afraid. Now that Keen Ru said this, everyone was more relieved. They stood there one by one, allowing the white tiger to walk through the crowd, constantly looking at this and sniffing that. And what about them? After losing their fear, their reactions were exactly the same as Keen Ru's. They were all honest farmers. Although they had the financial foundation to go to the zoo, they didn't have time. So apart from local dogs and cats, they didn't see many animals. After all, their hometown was in the plains, not in the mountains, where they could see wild boars, rabbits, pheasants, etc. from time to time. Therefore, after getting rid of the initial fear, everyone watched with relish, just like watching a peep show. Even the two little guys were screaming in their parents' arms, not looking scared at all. Of course, like Kinru, they were all a little disappointed with the legendary white tiger. Especially Kin's father. When the white tiger passed by him, he deliberately looked at Kinzu. "Xiaozu, didn't you say you had a white tiger? What is this? A leopard?" Kinzu touched his nose and explained with a smile. "Dad, this is a jaguar, also called a jaguar, which is different from our Chinese tiger. After all, isn't this a leopard?" Kin's mother muttered aside. Kinzu was a little embarrassed, wiped the cold sweat from his forehead and explained. "This, Mom, can't be said that way. It is still a tiger, but it looks more like a leopard." "A tiger that looks like a leopard?" Kin's mother was a little dizzy, and after looking at Kin's father, she shook her head helplessly, with an expression that said whatever you said was true. Helplessly covering his head, Kinzu was sweating profusely. His mother was really powerful. Kinzu had no choice but to look at the beautiful Zhu for help, hoping that this versatile daughter-in-law would come out and say a few words for him. But the beautiful Zhu would not take up this talk. "How do you want her to explain? Could it be that, Auntie, it is actually a tiger? Why does it look like a leopard?" "Because they have the same father and different mother. Ahem, a little evil." The beautiful Zhu quickly shook her little head and rolled her charming eyes at Kinzu. Since following this guy, she has become more and more bad. Really, I can't let him bully me all the time. Every time it seems like he is going to toss me apart. Oh, what am I thinking about? The beautiful Zhu couldn't help but cover her pretty face with her hands, feeling a little hot on it. Kinzu didn't know at this moment that because of her own reasons, the school beauty Zhu, who always showed a pure image, was now thinking about something unhealthy. Seeing that the girl rolled her eyes and ignored him, Kinzu turned his eyes to his brother-in-law. He hoped that this teacher would have some knowledge. But to his disappointment, Li Jianhua was also looking at Bear with curiosity, and looked at him from time to time, obviously ready to listen to his explanation. But Kinzu didn't know how to explain this matter. Helplessly, he had to cough dryly and said with a wry smile, "Well, actually, I also think this guy should be a leopard, but the Americans didn't let it be a tiger, so I can't do anything about it." After saying this, Kinzu almost lowered his head in shame. After all, he was also a biology student, and he could say such a perverted reasoning without changing his face. It's really a waste of talent. Fortunately, Kinzu didn't feel ashamed for long. After sniffing around everyone, Bear obviously didn't plan to continue to be a monkey. This guy staggered back to the lawn and continued to bask in the sun. Chapter 782. Mother Kin's problem. Compared to the white tiger's gentleness, Betty's performance was a bit naughty. After the white tiger went back to bask in the sun, it twisted its big butt and ran over. Or would a voice came before the person. Although this guy is small, his momentum is much greater than that of the white tiger. It's just a pity. Except for Kinzu, who is half a cowboy and has learned some biological knowledge, no one in the Kin family knows it. What's more, everyone is still immersed in the wonder of seeing a big tiger. For this little thing in front of them, which is only one size bigger than a dog, they really don't take it seriously. And Kinzu is even more direct, and his big slap is directly on the head of this guy who likes to pretend. Slap. Be honest, if you keep barking, you won't be able to eat for the whole day. Or unlike the fierce momentum just now, this time's barking obviously has a few traces of flattery and flattery. There is no way. People die for money and birds die for food. No matter how powerful an animal is, it can't go hungry. Betty, who was slapped by Kinzu, couldn't help but think of the delicious food that made people, no, bears drool. Raising his paw, the little guy didn't care about joining in the fun. He tucked his tail between his legs and ran away in shame. Xiaozu, what is this? Mother Kin hadn't recovered from the tiger incident just now. Now seeing this snow-white thing, her eyes immediately drifted over. This is a bear. The landlord Kin, who was so majestic just now, immediately smiled and explained carefully. Mom, this is a little bear. When I found it, it was lying in the snow and almost dead, so I brought it back. Bear? Kin's mother was still a little confused for a while. After thinking carefully for a long time, she shouted in surprise. What did you say? You also raised a bear? Hee, Mom, this is not a bear. Kinzu's face was full of smiles. There was no way. In order not to worry his mother, he continued to fool her. This is an unknown brown bear, different from the bears in our China. Different. Qin's mother looked at her son suspiciously, and then turned her head to look at Qin's father. Qin's father shook his head decisively. He didn't know what the difference was between the two guys. Seeing this, Qin's mother glared at this guy with dissatisfaction, and then cast her eyes on her daughter and son-in-law. Qin didn't know much about the difference between the two guys. However, she felt something was wrong. Why? Just look at Qin's winking expression not far away and you will know. However, she did not mean to expose her brother. After all, it was not a big deal. After smiling and shaking her head, Qin said, I don't know either, but there should be a difference, right? Since the adults didn't know, Qin's mother looked at the little girl Qinru in disappointment, hoping that her clever little daughter could surprise her. Does Qinru know? Nonsense, of course she knows. After all, she is going to high school, how could she not know this? But does she dare to say it? Facing Qin's fierce stare, the little girl stuck out her tongue and made a very wise choice. Well, Mom, there is a big difference between brown bears and bears. Huh? Tell me quickly. Qin's mother was shocked and stared at Qin's. She was just waiting for her little daughter to say a word, so that this little bastard could drive away all the tigers and bears. What's the difference? The little girl glanced at Qin's, and seeing that she looked like she was going to eat someone, she smiled and said, the bear is bigger and more fierce, while the brown bear is much more docile, and is very suitable as a pet. At the end, whether it was to make herself feel at ease or because she felt that this was more convincing, the little girl added another sentence. Yes, it is really suitable as a pet. Really? Mother Qin was a little suspicious. Just by the way that guy screamed just now, she didn't believe that the brown bear was a docile pet. However, facing the inquiring eyes of Mother Qin, whether they knew or not, they all nodded vigorously, as if it was really so. Qin's laughed at the side, but in order to protect his little pets, he had no choice but to do so. Seeing that his mother was still a little suspicious, Qin's hurriedly changed the subject and said with a smile, Okay, I guess Eva has prepared the food. Let's go eat something first and then have a good sleep. When everyone heard this, they all felt a little hungry, so they nodded in agreement. However, after hearing Qin's words, the look in Qin's mother's eyes when she looked at him became even more wrong. When the little sister ran into the house first, Zhu Mengye also fulfilled her duties as the hostess of the villa. She greeted everyone to come in for dinner. There is no way, there are too many rules in the country of etiquette, and you have to be humble for a long time when eating. This is still relatively intimate. If there are guests, you have to be humble all the time. And at this time, if everyone greets in the middle, it will make people feel a little messy. After seeing everyone enter the house, Qin's breathed a sigh of relief, and just as he was about to walk into the house, he was pulled by Qin's mother. Mom, what's wrong? Qin's saw that his mother's face was a little serious, and his heart suddenly skipped a beat, and a few bitter smiles appeared on his face. What's your attitude? Can't I come to you? Seeing that Qin's was a little impatient, Qin's mother suddenly became a little unhappy. No, Mom, aren't we going in to eat now? If there is anything, can we talk about it after we get up? It's not that Qin's doesn't want to listen to his mother's nagging, but some things can't be solved by nagging a few words. For example, she asked Qin's to drive away the white tiger now, can Qin's agree? Knowing that his mother is doing this for his own good, but she has already taken it as a pet, can she still drive it away? The system didn't teach him how to cancel the pet contract. But what if you don't do what she wants? She will definitely be unhappy, feeling that no one cares about what she says, or that her good intentions have been betrayed. Qin's is now in a dilemma. He can completely control those dangerous animals, but he can't tell his parents openly. His parents won't believe it even if he tells them. Just when Qin's was at a loss, his mother spoke again after nagging for a few words. However, the question asked by his mother this time not only made Qin's feel overwhelmed, but also made him feel like he was in trouble. Hey, Mom, why are you asking this? Eva is just an ordinary friend of mine. Touching his nose, facing the scrutinizing eyes of his mother, Qin's gritted his teeth and started talking nonsense. Chapter 783 Beef and Greater China. Ordinary friends. I think it's more than that. Qin's mother glared at her son and said, Tell me the truth, what do you want to do? I don't want to do anything. Being watched by his mother, Qin's felt guilty for no reason, so he had to pick out the key points and tell the story of the two sisters. Of course, it was as pitiful as possible. In Qin's description, he was a living bodhisattva who saved the suffering. and Eva and Dale became the kind of girls with a strong sense of gratitude. They came to help Kinzu because they were grateful for his help. Help! Kin's mother sighed helplessly, looking at the increasingly tall figure in front of her. She couldn't help sighing in her heart. It's true that the son is no longer under the control of the mother. In fact, without thinking, Kin's mother understood her son's mind. A man's home has several hot and beautiful beauties living all year round. Who would believe that he has no thoughts? But what can she say? After all, he is her son. Even as a woman, she can't stand her son's philandering. But what does it matter? With a deep sigh, Kin's mother said earnestly, Xiaoyu, Yoyo is such a good girl, and she has such a good family background. Since you have met her parents, you can't let her down, understand? Kinzu nodded hurriedly, showing a confident expression, and promised, Mom, don't worry, I will definitely treat Yoyo well and promise not to let her leave me. It's good that you know. Kin's mother glared at her son again, raised her legs and walked into the villa. The faint voice also came into Kinzu's ears from the air. If I know that you bully Yoyo, I will be the first to deal with you. Facing his mother's back, Kinzu could only smile helplessly. It was the first time he saw his mother care about someone so much. He couldn't help but sigh in his heart, as expected of the beautiful lady Zhu, who captured his mother in just a few days. Following everyone into the villa, Eva had already brought up the prepared meals. Of course, it was just to fill the stomach, so it wasn't too rich. Each person had a piece of tender steak fried to 70% doneness, plus a piece of golden cod fillet. Toasted fragrant bread slices, hot dogs, bacon, poached eggs, and a cup of fragrant hot milk. It was so rich that it was a bit extravagant. Uncle, Aunt, eat slowly, you can have more if it's not enough. After greeting Kinzu's parents in broken Chinese, Eva continued to run into the kitchen to work. Her and her sister's breakfast was not ready yet. Hey, don't be busy, this is enough. Seeing Eva running back to the kitchen, Kin's mother stood up and wanted to chase her, but was stopped by Kinzu. Mom, don't worry about them, eat quickly, I'm so sleepy. As he said that, Kinzu yawned loudly, he was really a bit sleepy. Kin's mother thought about it and it was true. Her son had been with her and the others for so long, so she should eat first. Okay, let's eat quickly. This beef is the kind you brought back last time, right? It looks a little different. After sitting down, looking at the many delicious foods on the table, especially the fragrant fried veal, she felt a little distressed. Why did you make so much? What if we can't finish it? How could that be? Kinzu smiled and picked up the bread slice, dipped it in ketchup, and put a piece of bacon in it, and then said, Mom, even if you can't finish it, we still have several grown men here, this is not enough. Isn't this enough? Kin's mother looked at the large piece of tender veal steak and couldn't help but feel a little puzzled. It's already 1 pound, right? Ahem. Kinzu almost choked and said with a wry smile, Mom, why do you care how much it weighs? It's okay as long as it tastes good. It's okay if you can't finish it. There are so many mouths waiting in our house. Yes, Auntie, this beef is delicious. I can eat a piece. Seeing that Kinzu was about to be scolded again, Zhu Mengyo hurriedly helped Kin's mother cut the beef into several small pieces and said with a smile, Come on, Auntie, try it. Although she was very satisfied with the service of her future daughter-in-law, Kin's mother still had some doubts in her heart. Feeding them such good food. Isn't it too wasteful? Good guy, even if they can't finish the leftovers, it's better than the food we used to have. This damn child actually feeds the dogs such good food now, which is better than what we used to have. Kinzu didn't know that his mother had scolded him in her heart at this moment. Seeing Zhu Mengyo coming to comfort his mother, he was happy to be free, no longer talking about the previous topic, and turned to greet his sister and brother-in-law. Sister, brother-in-law, come and try it. How does the taste of your own homemade steak compare with that of our restaurant chef? Li Jianhua picked up the knife and fork, skillfully divided the steak into several pieces, picked up the chopsticks to pick up a piece and put it in his mouth, chewed for a while, and nodded with satisfaction. Xiaoyu, although the chef's skills are not as good as our chef's, this beef is better than the beef we use. Kinzu smiled and noticed that his father was not used to using the knife and fork, so he quickly picked up the knife and fork in front of him and skillfully helped him divide the steak. Dad, try it, how is it? Kin's father was not polite. Just now, he was a little envious of Kin's mother. She had a virtuous future daughter-in-law to help her do everything, but he could only watch from the side. While eating, Qin's father muttered in his heart that this stinky boy had some good eyesight and was worthy of raising him so much. Only after hearing Qin Zhu's question did he calm down and taste the beef carefully. Unfortunately, after a large piece of beef was almost eaten, Qin's father still couldn't taste it, and could only touch his head awkwardly. Well, I think they are both good and delicious. As soon as Qin's father finished speaking, Qinru, who was chewing slowly on the side, laughed and said without giving her father any face, "Dad, what do you mean they are both delicious? I heard from Sister Eva that the price difference between the two kinds of beef is very large." Qin's father was not embarrassed at all for his little daughter's revelation, and smiled and said, "I really don't think there is any difference. It's just like the golden leaf cigarettes that cost 10 yuan a pack in our family. I feel that they are no different from DA's Thonghua when I smoke them." Although Qin's father's reasoning was correct, the example he gave obviously made Qin's mother a little unhappy. After glaring at his wife, he muttered in annoyance, "Lao Qin, what are you talking about here? What's the good of smoking? And DA's Thonghua, don't lead the children astray." Chapter 784a. Hearty Breakfast. After being glared at by Qin's mother, Qin's father also felt a little embarrassed and said with a wry smile, "Well, I'm just giving an example, just an example." Speaking of which, in Qin Zhu's family, only Qin's father is an old smoker, and it's useless to quit. Of course, this is also because Qin Zhu usually smokes less, especially in front of his parents. He basically doesn't smoke much. Therefore, Qin's mother still doesn't know that her son has started smoking a long time ago. However, this is also a good thing. If Qin's mother knew that her son had started smoking a long time ago, Qin's father's life would probably be even more difficult. A simple breakfast ended with a few words and laughter. Just as Qin Zhu expected, for 3 big men, a small steak is not enough to fill their stomachs. Even if the fish fillet and other things were solved, Qin Zhu only ate 8/10 full. But thinking that he would go to bed soon, he was afraid that he would not be able to sleep if he ate too much, so he didn't let Eva work anymore. On the other hand, Tongton and Lily, perhaps because it was their first time to go out, were still excited, and even ate more actively than usual. The breakfast that Qinwan and her mother hadn't finished was eaten up by the 2 little ones. "Tongton, Lily, are you full?" Qin Zhu stared at the 2 little ones' small bodies, and wanted to ask, "Where did you eat so much?" "Uncle, we're full." After the 2 little ones answered in unison, Tongton yawned, looked at Qinwan beside her, and said weakly, "Mom, are you alright? I want to go to bed." Qinwan heard that, and gave up competing with Eva to wash the dishes. Instead, she cleaned the table a little, and smiled at everyone and said, "Okay, I'll take the 2 guys upstairs to sleep first, you guys go to bed early." Qin's father and mother heard that, and they also stood up, stretched their backs, and the 2 followed with a smile. Obviously, they were all a little tired. In the blink of an eye, except for Eva and Zhu Mengyo who were busy in the kitchen, Qin Zhu was the only one left in the huge living room. After sitting in the living room for a while, he took advantage of Zhu Mengyo to clean up the living room and pulled her into his arms. "Wife, how about we go to rest too? Don't make trouble, I haven't cleaned up yet." The beautiful Zhu struggled to leave someone's arms, and said with a smile on her lips, "You go to sleep first, wait until I have cleaned up everything here." Qin Zhu lay on the sofa with a bit of depression, watching the graceful figure disappear in the kitchen, feeling very depressed. How could you do this to me in such a good time and beautiful scenery? Especially when listening to the laughter coming from inside, Qin Zhu felt a little scared. The reason why he was so anxious to take the beautiful Zhu upstairs was also to separate them. There was no way, if a fight broke out inside now, Qin Zhu would not be so worried. After all, that was a normal reaction. But what about now? They were playing around inside, and it seemed as if no one knew about the other. But, is this possible? Anyone who is not a fool can see the relationship between the few people. How could a smart woman like Zhu Daimaran not see it? But the more she tried not to say it, the more Qin Zhu felt uneasy. He was afraid that the 2 of them would start fighting while laughing. But, he obviously overestimated his charm. There are really few men who would let a woman forget everything and beat someone up for him. "Hey, Qin, if you are bored, you can go and prepare food for the little guys." Seeing Qin Zhu lying on the sofa in a daze, secretly glancing at Eva here, he couldn't help but stick his head out and called out in a tender voice. Hearing the voice, Qin Zhu didn't hesitate, and jumped off the sofa. He ran to prepare food for the little guys this morning. Moreover, in order to reward the guys who performed well today, Kinzu also increased the amount so that the guys could eat until their mouths were full of oil, and then they could return satisfied. When he was done with his work, the beautiful Zhu had already prepared it, and was waiting for him on the sofa. Kinzu didn't waste time. After instructing Eva to prepare dinner, he pulled the beautiful Zhu, who was already a little sleepy because she was sitting on the sofa, upstairs. It is said that when you are full and warm, you'll think about that. Kinzu, who originally just wanted to hug the beauty's soft body and have a good sleep, immediately lost his control of his body after getting on the bed. Well, this is what Kinzu said. As for the beautiful Zhu, she sneered at this. In her opinion, this guy had a long criminal record and must have planned it downstairs. Ahem, of course, no one would take the initiative to talk about this kind of thing. When Kinzu woke up from his sleep in a daze, he felt that there was a dark scene in front of him. Subconsciously, he looked up and looked at the window inside the large French window in the bedroom. Fortunately, the curtains were not drawn. However, looking at the light outside the window, which was not much better than that in the room, he realized that it was already dark outside. Kinzu stretched lazily and was about to get out of bed, but he didn't expect to wake up the beauty in his arms. What time is it? Why is it dark? Zhu Mengyu opened her eyes in a daze, but when she looked up, she saw that the sky outside was a little gloomy, and she couldn't help but be shocked. Let me see. Kinzu fumbled to find the mobile phone on the bedside, opened it and saw that it was already past 6 o'clock in the evening. It's over, husband, get up quickly, aunt and others must have gotten up. While speaking in a panic, the beautiful Zhu began to put on clothes. But she hadn't put on her coat yet, and the clothes she had just put on were taken off by Kinzu again. Hey, what are you doing? The beautiful lady Zhu, who was putting on the one-piece sweater, couldn't help but let out a cry, and then begged for mercy helplessly. Hubby, stop it, let's get up quickly. Seeing that the beautiful lady Zhu begged for mercy, Kinzu sat up with a smug look on his face and began to look for his clothes. Unfortunately, they were a little too crazy before going to bed. At this moment, the bedroom was full of clothes, and he didn't know which one was clean and which one was dirty. In desperation, he had to get out of bed, go to the closet, and start choosing clothes again. When the two dressed up and came back to the living room, they found that everyone had really gotten up and were gathering in the kitchen to help. Si est escuchando esta novela en un canal distinto a mundo fanfic novelas, significat lo descarga and y subir en sinisfuerzos invitamos cordialmente a visitar nuestro canal. Mundo fanfic novelas al encontrar la versión original de esta historia y podrás explorar muchas otras novelas de diversos narradores. Te esperamos para sumergirte en un mundo de novelas incredibles. Chapter 785 Horse Racing in the Living Room. Seeing Kinzu coming down, Tongton and Lily, who had become more energetic after a good sleep, immediately greeted him happily and shouted in unison, "Uncle, where is the pony? We want to ride the pony." Before Kinzu could say anything, Kinwan had already poked her head out of the kitchen and scolded him unhappily. "Where can I find a pony for you at this time of night? Just watch TV and stop bothering your uncle." The two little guys who were energetic just now suddenly became a little wilted after being scolded by their mother. However, after quietly looking back and seeing that her mother did not come out, Tongton grabbed Kinzu's arm again. The little girl did not say anything, but looked at Kinzu with pitiful big eyes and shook it hard. The little girl with two ponytails looked at him with a pitiful look, which was unbearable even for a heartless person, let alone Kinzu. But what Kinwan said was also realistic. It was really not suitable to ride a pony at this time of night. What's more, the temperature in Boston at night is not comparable to that during the day. Although it's so warm in that villa, if you go out now, although your breath won't turn into ice, it will still be unbearable. Thinking of this, Kinzu looked at Zhu Mengyu helplessly, motioned her to go in and help first, and then scratched his head awkwardly. "Dear Tongton, it's not that your uncle doesn't let you ride a pony, it's mainly because it's too late now, you see it's dark outside." Kinzu pointed to the floor-to-ceiling glass next to him and asked the two little guys to look outside. But how can a child who is throwing a tantrum be coaxed so easily? Tongton held Kinzu's arm tightly, shaking it and saying in her aggrieved voice, "Uncle is a liar. He said that we should ride ponies when we came to America." "That's right, Uncle is a liar. He said that we should ride ponies." Looking at Tongton's pitiful appearance, Kinzu felt so uncomfortable. He picked up the little girl and sat on the sofa to coax her. "Good boy Tongton, don't cry. Let's eat and go to sleep. Tomorrow morning, Uncle will take you to ride ponies, okay?" Tongton didn't say anything. She hugged Kinzu's neck tightly and curled her little body in Kinzu's arms, protesting silently. Turning his head to look at Lolly beside him, the little guy was also not quiet. Although he didn't have the little girl's attitude like Tongton, he also pouted his little mouth angrily, with a face full of desire and dissatisfaction. Ahem, well, Kinzu is really having a headache now. Turning his head to look outside, and then looking at his empty living room, he wondered whether he should bring Zuli here for a walk. Kinzu's eyes lit up immediately when he thought of this. Yes, if you can't go outside, then running around the house will do. However, thinking about the fact that there is only one pony, Kinzu is scratching his head again. Knowing that these two little devils would come, why didn't he buy two more? However, it's useless to think about it now. Kinzu looked down at Xiao Tongton who was protesting silently in his arms, and then looked up at Lei Lei who was kicking the sofa with a pout. Just when he was about to speak, he saw his sister coming out of the kitchen with a gloomy face, and waved at her. Sister, go cook first, go quickly, leave this to me. Qinwan ignored Kinzu's words, walked over angrily, and said, Xiao Zhu, don't worry about it. If I don't deal with them well today, they will rebel. Seeing their mother coming in aggressively, the two little guys were a little scared, but at the same time, the worst side of the children was also reflected. Stubborn. That's right, she was just stubborn. She was obviously afraid of being beaten, but she refused to admit defeat. She stiffened her neck and looked like she didn't care about anyone, but her tears were streaming down. Kinzu was a little anxious when he saw this. He quickly put the little girl down, stood up and stopped her sister. While pushing her inside, he complained. Sister, you're really something. What are you doing? You scared the child. At this time, Zhu Mengyu and Qin's mother, who heard the noise, also came out of the kitchen. Zhu Mengyu was fine, she just helped Kinzu push Qinwan back to the kitchen. But Qin's mother was a little unhappy. She hugged the little girl and coaxed her, and also scolded Qinwan. Now it was Qinwan's turn to be depressed. Looking at her brother and mother, she covered her head helplessly. You guys, just keep pampering them. Haven't you noticed that these two guys are getting more and more disobedient? Kinzu heard this, smiled and waved his hands, and comforted him. Sister, you're wrong. Children, isn't it normal to have a little temper occasionally? Okay, normal, then you were responsible for coaxing those two little ancestors. Spreading her hands, Qinwan simply stopped caring and turned into the kitchen to help Eva with the work. In fact, although she said this, she cherished her children more than her mother in her heart. Otherwise, how do you think that stubborn temper was cultivated? The reason why she was so angry today was because this was the first day in the United States, and she was afraid that these two little guys would embarrass herself and others in front of foreigners. She heard how well the children in the United States were educated and how sensible their children were. Therefore, her own children must not lose to those foreigners. It was because of this mentality that she wanted to give them a good beating when she saw that the two children did not give her face on the first day. It's just a pity that the two little guys are not afraid of me because they're spoiled at home. Even my mother scolded me. Just when Qinwan was thinking about these things in the kitchen, she heard the screams and laughter of the two children in the living room outside. Qinwan's heart skipped a beat. She put down the tomato she was washing and looked out with Zudame. Ah, what is this? Qinwan's eyes were immediately attracted by the pony in the living room, which was shiny black but only slightly taller than her children. Is this the pony? It's really small. Yes, this is the Australian miniature horse. It looks so cute. Although it was not the first time Zhu Mengyu saw it, she couldn't help but admire it. Yes, it's very cute. Qinwan nodded in admiration. However, looking at the beautiful Zhu who turned over and rode on the pony with the help of Qinzu, she continued. Especially when children ride on it, it's so cute. Now, it was Zhu Mengyu's turn to nod. Looking at Qinzu playing with the two little guys, her heart suddenly felt sad for no reason. Qinwan didn't notice the change in the mood of the beautiful Zhu beside her. She turned her head and looked at the pony running enthusiastically in the living room, and said with some emotion, "You spoil these two little guys so much, I will have a headache when I go back." Chapter 786 The Sensible Little Ones. In response to Qinwan's sigh, Zhu Mengyu just smiled reluctantly, but did not express any opinion. However, she also sighed quietly in her heart. I also want to have a headache for the child, but unfortunately, I don't even have the chance to have a headache. In the living room, Tongton sat on the pony that had not been pulled out of the circle for a long time, and her little face was red with excitement. Although it was her first time to ride a pony, her body was a little nervous and stiff, but seeing that the ground under her feet was so low, she was relieved and kept shouting. Gee. However, although the living room was spacious, it was just a living room after all. It's okay to ride the horse here, but as for letting it run wild, don't even think about it, it's impossible to achieve. In this regard, Tongton said that they were already very satisfied. Even Lily, who didn't get a turn for the time being and hid on the sofa watching Tongton riding wildly on the horse, was not dissatisfied with this. In his opinion, he was already very satisfied to have a moving thing to ride. Now, he was so envious of others riding bicycles, how could he ask for anything else? No, he really had something to ask for. That was, let Tongton get off quickly. He also wanted to try the feeling of riding a horse wildly. It was not known whether it was because she heard his wish or for some other reason, Tongton asked to stop after riding 2 more laps. Uncle, pick me up and let Lily ride for a while. Kinzu woke up from his daze after hearing this, smiled and touched the 2 high ponytails of the little girl, and praised. Our little Tongton is the most sensible, she knows how to take care of her brother, so good. After being praised by Kinzu, the corners of the little girl's mouth almost grinned to the roots of her ears, revealing a row of small white teeth, and smiled sweetly. As a result, Lily couldn't wait to climb onto the pony when Tongton handed him the reins. Unfortunately, riding a horse for the first time was not that easy. Lily, come here, put your feet on the stirrup first, yes, right there. King's father, who was watching from the side, couldn't help but come over, stopped Kinzu who wanted to carry Lily up, and gave instructions with a smile. Lily didn't think there was anything wrong. After hearing what his grandfather said, he did it obediently. Whether it was the way to hold the reins, the way to step on the stirrups, or the posture of getting on the horse. Under the guidance of King's father, the little guy did it very methodically, and looked quite good. Hey, Dad, have you ridden a horse before? Kinzu, who had been feeling a little uncomfortable, asked quickly. In his impression, he had never seen his father ride a horse. Facing Kinzu's question, after the little girl slowly got used to it, King's father then explained with a smile. There used to be horses in the production team. When I was young, I learned a little from an old master who was in charge of the horses. But I haven't ridden for decades, so I don't know if I can still ride. Kinzu was not worried about this, and said with a smile. I didn't expect you to be so good, just look at Lily and you will know. After a pause, seeing that King's father's mouth was slightly raised, obviously a little proud, he teased. Dad, I think, if I give you a horse now, I guess you can participate in the cowboy competition. King's father heard this, glared at this guy unhappily, and muttered. Participate in the competition, are you going to embarrass yourself? Kinzu was a little disapproving of this, and smiled and waved his hand. Dad, friendship first, competition second, don't you think so? King's father was choked, and almost couldn't help but hit Kinzu hard on the head. However, thinking that he only hit such a son, it would be troublesome if he really hit him stupidly. While the father and son were playing with the 2 little guys in the living room, the brother-in-law sadly called into the kitchen to help. It was not until this time that he came out while wiping his hands. Shouts you, Dad, let's get ready for dinner. As he said that, he looked at Lily who was still on the pony and kept having fun, and walked over with a smile. Hey, our little knight, are you hungry? Covering his empty stomach, Lily looked at his father, then at the pony under his butt, and immediately fell into a dilemma. Is he hungry? Is he hungry or not? After asking twice, Lily wanted to say that he was not hungry, but reality forced him to nod. Uncle, Dad, Grandpa, let's go eat together. As he said that, Lily wanted to turn over. At this time, Li Jianhua was a little nervous, and hurriedly wanted to step forward to help, but was stopped by King's father. It's okay, it's not that high, just exercise the kid's body. What kind of exercise? King's mother's somewhat anxious voice came, you old man, I tell you, if Lady gets bumped into anything, I will never forgive you. After being nagged by King's mother, King's father immediately wilted. In fact, this time Li Jianhua didn't even have to do it himself. King's father ran over and picked Lily up. Kinzu was a little stunned watching from the side. How could he not know, and his father became so obedient? Li Jianhua was knowledgeable, but just smiled and didn't say anything, and continued to prepare for everyone to eat. Okay, lady, Tong, let's get ready for dinner. Kinzu put the reins in place, led the pony with something tied to all 4 hooves, and looked at the 2 little guys. I'll take this horse away first, and you can ride it when you wake up tomorrow morning, okay? Although Tongton was a little reluctant, she looked at the many people coming out of the kitchen and knew that it was not the time to be willful, so she snuggled up to Kinzu obediently, unwilling to leave. For the little girl, who is the closest person these 2 days? There is no doubt that it must be Kinzu. Even Kin's mother, who has always loved her, can't compete with Kinzu and can only line up behind Kinzu. This also made Kin's mother very unhappy when she saw Kinzu these days, as if her most beloved thing was taken away. For example, Kin's mother scolded Kinzu these 2 days, and there is no reason without this. In this regard, Kinzu was also helpless and could only choose to go along with her. There is no way, who let her be his mother. However, now he has to send the pony out, and he can't let the little guy go out with him. Good boy Tongton, go find your dad first, and your uncle will send Zuiho back first. Perhaps because there were so many people, the little girl nodded very obediently this time and didn't follow Kinzu. With a sigh of relief, Kinzu led the pony, quickly opened the door and walked out. A moment later, when Kinzu returned to the villa, the things in the villa had been almost packed up. Kin's mother and Zumengyo were also carrying plates and placing dishes on the dining table. Chapter 787. Stir-fried beef with garlic. The breeze in the early morning blew the dense branches and leaves of the pine trees outside the window, causing a rustling sound. The rising sun also cast a little golden light, spreading on the green land, splashing a burst of brilliant colors. In the luxurious villa on the ranch, it seemed very lively at the moment. Kin's mother woke up early in the morning, washed up and went to the kitchen to make some breakfast for her family. But when she got to the kitchen, she found that not only Eva was busy, but even Zumengyo was helping by the side, rubbing her sleepy eyes. Yo-yo, why don't you sleep a little longer? King walked forward with some distress, grabbed the little hand of the beautiful Zhu, and asked with concern, "Why did you get up so early?" "There's nothing to do." Zumengyo smiled, yawned a little, and then said, "Nothing, I can't sleep, get up and help Eva prepare some food for everyone." Seeing her unable to open her eyes and trying to be energetic, King's mother couldn't help but smile a little. "Okay, you go to sleep for a while, Auntie will come here." After saying that, regardless of Zhu's objection, she pushed her out. Not only her, but also Eva, who was busy preparing sandwiches on the side, was persuaded to go out by her soft voice. Standing outside the open kitchen, watching King's mother busy inside, Eva and Zumengyo looked at each other, and they looked at each other. At this moment, Zumengyo's spirit was not so sluggish, and she didn't feel so sleepy. In other words, it was a shock to her spirit. There was no other way. She had gotten up early today on purpose, wanting to leave a good impression in the minds of King's father and mother. At the very least, she couldn't get a reputation for being lazy and gluttonous. For this, she even set several alarms to force herself to get up on time. What was the result? She got up, but was she going to watch the excitement outside? Why did she get up so early? When she thought of this, the beautiful Zhu was a little uneasy, as if she had done nothing. Thinking of what Kinzu had said when she got up early this morning, Zumengyo smiled bigly. It was so true. He had expected that his mother would not be able to sit still, so he prepared a few handfuls of noodles in the kitchen for her to take out when the time came. Thinking of this, Zumengyo came back to her senses a little. Seeing Kin's mother looking at the kitchen, she hurried in to help. But before she could raise her feet, a somewhat lame but very nice Chinese voice rang out beside her. Mengyo, Eva called Zumengyo's name in a tongue-twisting way, and felt that it was not as convenient as calling her Zhu directly before. But she took the initiative to ask for it to be changed, and Eva had no choice but to obey. What's wrong, Eva? Listening to the poor Chinese language, Zumengyo stopped and couldn't help laughing. In fact, the reason why she asked to change the name was that she always felt strange when she was called Zhu. It was not as intimate as calling Mengyo, so she asked Eva and her sister to call her by her name directly. However, she obviously overestimated Eva's understanding of Chinese. After hearing Dale's fluent Chinese, the beautiful Zhu subconsciously thought that Eva's Chinese level should not be bad. But who would have thought that her sister spoke Chinese very well? But this did not mean that Eva, a big foreign horse, could also speak Chinese. No, that can't be said. Because after Eva's emergency teaching by her sister and studying in the town school in her spare time, her Chinese is actually quite good. It's just that sometimes, she can't understand or say some unfamiliar words. While she was daydreaming, Eva's somewhat poor Chinese came to her ears again. Auntie, are you always so enthusiastic? Eva asked with a stutter, gesturing with her little hands at Zumengyo, who turned her head. This should be it. Listening to Eva's words, the beautiful Zhu answered uncertainly. Eva was a little confused. What does it mean to be it? If it is, it is, and if it is not, it is not. Where does it come from? Moreover, how do you read this in English? For a moment, Eva was also confused and couldn't understand the question of the beautiful Zhu. Ah, yes. Seeing Eva's confused look, Zhu Mengyo quickly changed her words and explained with a smile. Auntie has always been very enthusiastic. When she was at home, she also got up so early to prepare breakfast. Now, Eva understood and was relieved. Okay, Auntie is busy here, so I'll go clean the stable. Clapping her hands, Eva tidied up, greeted Zhu Mengyo, and then greeted Qin's mother in the kitchen. After Qin's mother smiled and agreed, Eva twisted her exaggerated curves and left the villa directly. It didn't matter that she left, but Zhu Damli was a little dumbfounded. She couldn't do it like this big foreign horse, leaving Qin's mother to do other things by herself. Not to mention being impolite, even she couldn't get through it. She stamped her feet and sighed deeply at Eva's back. While sighing at the free and easy European and American women, Zhu Damli had to walk into the kitchen again. Because she found that Qin's mother was a little confused in the kitchen. There was no way. Although the kitchen was open, the area was not small. Just the exhaust design made her feel a headache. She was not sure where to put things. Although it was not the first time for her to enter this kitchen, she was not familiar with it now. She even couldn't find where she was looking for. Fortunately, at this time, the beautiful Zhu came in time. She opened the door of a locker and took out a few bags of noodles bought from the Chinese supermarket. The beautiful Zhu had a warm smile on her face and handed them directly to Qin's mother. Auntie, use this. After putting the noodles aside, Zhu Mengyo kept smiling and said softly, Qin Zhu knows that you like to eat noodles in the morning, so he specially prepared it. Hearing this, Qin's mother smiled and squeezed the little hand of the beautiful Zhu. Yo, you are still thoughtful. Eating those things early in the morning really doesn't feel full. Zhu Mengyo smiled softly, but secretly thanked Qin Zhu in her heart. It was all thanks to this bad guy. Thinking of this, she turned around and took out a pound of thawed beef from the refrigerator, and said with a smile, Auntie, I heard from Qin Zhu that when you eat noodles, you'll like to make some fried beef with garlic the most. He also prepared beef. Chapter 788 Italian Fried Noodles with Soup. Although the future mother-in-law and daughter-in-law downstairs were busy in the kitchen, Qin Zhu in the bedroom was sleeping soundly. It was not until the food was ready that Qin's mother directed the two little guys who had just woken up to wake up the lazy uncle to eat. For such a task, both Tongton and Lily were happy to accept it. After Qin helped them wash their faces and brush their teeth, the little guy wearing only a woolen sweater ran back to the second floor. These two children are really worrying. Qin shook her head helplessly, put the small down jacket in her hand aside, and didn't care about it anymore. Anyway, it's not that cold in the villa, it's okay to wear less. The two little guys who ran to the second floor couldn't help but lower their voices when they reached the door of the bedroom. Little Tongton, wearing a pink woolen sweater and a messy hair, hadn't had time to comb it. Standing at the door of the bedroom, he looked up at the slightly open door, then looked at Lady beside him, rolled his eyes, and whispered in a seductive voice, You go in first, I'll help you watch from behind. Lady, who was wearing a blue cashmere sweater and had a short flat head, nodded while applying skin cream on his face. But just as he pushed the door open a little and was about to lift his legs to walk inside, he felt something was wrong. The little guy rubbed his face a few times randomly, turned his head and looked at Tong, who was sticking his head out behind him, and muttered in dissatisfaction, What are you doing to help me watch from behind? There's no one behind. Tong, who was just poking her head out and waiting for Lei to go in and take the lead, was choked by this sudden sentence. After a long pause, she said, Lily, you're a man, shouldn't you walk in front? This sentence really touched Lei's heart. According to the official statement, it was poking the little guy's sweet spot. After being told this by Tongton, Lily's chest stood up higher than usual, and he pushed open the door with a great attitude. Oh my God, this idiot. Tongton, who was following behind him, covered her forehead helplessly, and sighed like a little adult. Qin Zhu was sleeping in a daze, and was suddenly awakened by a loud noise. Just as he barely opened his dazed eyes, he saw a little girl with disheveled hair in front of him. Fuck, what the hell? Qin Zhu was shocked and immediately lost his sleepiness. His dazed eyes opened wide. Staring closely at the little figure in front of him who was dressed in pink but had black hair, Qin Zhu felt more and more that something was wrong. I say, little girl. Kinzu stretched weakly, and lay back lazily, and said unhappily, "Why are you coming to my room so early in the morning instead of asking your mother to comb your hair?" Tongton didn't know that she had scared this lazy uncle. She was still glaring at him fiercely. Lady, who was beside him, raised his head and showed a smug expression, and scolded him loudly. "Stinky lady, I told you to be careful. We're here to scare Uncle Lazy. How can you push the door like that?" After being told by Tongton, Lady Lay also reacted and slapped his head. "Oh, I forgot about it. It's all your fault. Now I can't scare Uncle Lazy." "Well, I didn't mean it. Let's continue to scare him tomorrow." Listening to the two little guys beside the bed, still chattering about how to scare him, Kinzu couldn't help but raise a few black lines on his forehead. However, he looked at the time and it was already past 8 o'clock. Thinking that today was the first day for his parents to come, he simply stopped lying in bed and rolled over and got up. Unexpectedly, his sudden action scared the two little guys. Seeing Uncle Lazy suddenly stand up, the two little guys who were discussing the problem heatedly realized that something was wrong. He actually discussed this in front of his uncle. After looking at each other, he saw his uncle walking towards him, and he couldn't help but screamed and turned around and ran out. What are these two guys doing?" Looking at the two little guys who fled in panic, Kinzu was a little stunned and confused. Shaking his head, he opened the closet to find clothes and sighed. The brain circuits of children are indeed not something that ordinary people can understand. After he washed up and came to the restaurant with a new look, he immediately smelled a familiar fragrance. Wow, it smells so good. Taking a deep breath of the fragrance floating in the air, Kinzu smiled a little exaggeratedly. It's still that familiar smell. What familiar smell? I feel like going to eat. Mother Keen glared at her son unhappily and sent him to the kitchen to serve the rice. She came to Eva and Dale's sisters and asked with concern, "Girl, how does it taste? Does it suit your appetite?" "Very good, very good." Hearing this, Eva quickly raised her head and gave Mother Keen a thumbs up, not sparing her praise. Of course, how much is true and how much is false, only a know. However, Dale, who was not very talkative, also raised her head this time, showing a smile and praising, "Auntie's cooking skills are really good, the food is delicious, delicious." While saying this, she slurped her lips, obviously it was a little spicy. Hearing the praises of the two girls, King's mother's face was immediately full of joy. However, she was a little puzzled when she saw the way the two girls ate. Because according to her method, the noodles were cooked with vegetables, just ordinary vegetable soup noodles, and only a little oil was added, and even the salt was very little. Then she used green and red peppers, added a little chili pepper, and then fried beef with garlic. Of course, the beef not only has a lot of oil, but also a lot of salt, and added a little soy sauce. It really doesn't look good. But just smelling the fragrance floating in the air is enough to make people ignore its appearance. When it's time to eat, put the fried beef directly into your bowl as a side dish and eat it with the noodles. This is a very simple way of eating. When Kinzu was young, his family often ate this way. However, there was no beef at the time, and pork was usually used. Although the way Eva and Dale eat is similar to Kinzu and his family, it is a little different. The same thing is that they all mix the beef fried with garlic with noodles. The difference is that they just add some noodles and don't put any soup. They just eat it as dry noodles. Isn't it too dry to eat it this way? King's mother was full of doubts. She wanted to remind these two silly girls, but she didn't know how to start. But what she didn't know was that in the hearts of Eva and Dale, they also thought that Kinzu's family was very strange. Why add a little soup to the fried noodles? Is it to save trouble to put the soup and the Italian fried noodles together? If so, wouldn't it taste strange? Chapter 789. Riding a horse. Shooting a gun. Fishing in the wild. After breakfast, several women were left to clean up the mess. Kinzu took his father and brother-in-law, and the three of them sat on the leather sofa next to the fireplace. Taking out the purple clay tea set from under the coffee table, Kinzu said with a smile while boiling water, "Dad, this is a good thing that Mengyo found for me. I forgot to bring it when I went back. Come and try it." Hearing what Kinzu said, King's father, who had been thinking about going out for horseback riding after dinner, couldn't help but become interested. He stretched out his hand to open the tea can, pinched out 2 green tea leaves from it, and put them in front of his eyes to look at them carefully. While looking at them, he also put them under his nose and sniffed them. After a while, King's father put down the tea in his hand, nodded with satisfaction, and praised with a smile, Not bad, it is indeed a good thing. The taste is very mellow and fragrant. Is it so good? Li Jianhua was a little unconvinced, and also stretched out his hand to pinch 2 tea leaves and looked at them carefully. He remembered that Qinzu should not drink tea, right? For people who don't drink tea, would their families prepare such top-grade tea? He is also a tea lover. Although he has never drunk top-grade tea due to financial conditions, he probably still has some understanding of it. Therefore, when he put the tea under his nose and sniffed it gently, he didn't say anything. He had to admit that the appearance of this tea was indeed better than the best he had ever seen. Qinzu paid attention to the actions of the 2 every day. After the water boiled, he washed the teacups first, and then began to make tea. With a flurry of smooth movements, 3 cups of tea with green color appeared in front of Qin's father and Li Jianhua. Good guy, Xiaoxiu, where did you learn this? After these actions, Li Jianhua's eyes were a little straight. Is this still the same Qinzu? If I remember correctly, during the Chinese New Year last year, when there were guests at home, everyone else brewed tea, but he was holding a bottle of beverage. How come now, looking at the situation, this guy not only loves to drink tea, but also seems to be very good at tea art? Of course, in Li Jianhua's opinion, it is impossible for someone who is so good at tea art not to like tea. In fact, this is really a misunderstanding of Li Jianhua. Knowing tea art does not mean that you love tea. Well, that can't be said. It can only be said that under normal circumstances, only people who love tea will have the patience to learn tea art. But what he didn't know was that Qinzu happened to be an exception. Although he also loves tea, he didn't have much patience to learn tea art. The reason why he is doing so well now is because of the medical skills in his mind. Chinese medicine is profound. Even the tea ceremony is included in the health preservation. Therefore, although Qinzu didn't learn much, his skill in making tea is not worse than those who professionally learn tea art. In fact, it is better than them. Ha, brother-in-law, I didn't learn much. I just figured it out at home. Qinzu chuckled and handed 2 cups of still hot tea to the 2 of them. Taking the teacup, Li Jianhua sniffed it gently, with an intoxicated expression on his face, and praised. It is indeed top-grade tea, this tea tastes so good. His words, coupled with that intoxicated expression, made Qinru and the 2 little guys who were paying attention to the movements here become a little dazed. Especially the younger sister Qinru, looking at the cups of green and steaming tea, she said with some expectation and envy. Brother, I want to drink too, pour me a cup. Why didn't you help Mom clean up the kitchen? Why are you here to join in the fun? Qinzu asked with a smile. Although he asked this, his hands did not slow down at all. He took out another purple clay teacup from the side. After quickly scalding her with hot water, Qinzu picked up the teapot and brewed a cup for her. Mom and the others are over there, so they don't need me. Picking up the teacup, the little girl put it under her nose and sniffed it gently, pretending to be intoxicated, and said, "It smells so good, is this really tea?" Qinzu was a little amused and knocked the little girl on the head with his hand. Don't make trouble, take the little ones to play over there, and wait for Mom and the others to finish, then we will go out together. I don't want to, they are looking for you. After taking a sip, the little girl frowned slightly, feeling very confused. This tea is obviously very plain and tasteless, but why is it so exaggerated on TV? Looking for me? What do you want from me? Qinzu didn't pay attention to his sister's little thoughts. His attention had been attracted by the 2 little guys. He didn't know why they were looking for him. Uncle, you said you would take us to ride ponies in the morning. Tongton and Lily don't care about your tea ceremony. After coming back to his senses from his daze, he just happened to hear Qinzu's question and quickly took over. Qinzu touched his nose. How come these 2 guys have such a good memory? But looking at those 2 pairs of bright eyes, he still smiled and nodded. I did say that, but we have to wait for Grandma and Mom to go out together. Don't you want to wait for Mom and run out by yourself? This. The 2 little guys hesitated for just a few seconds and immediately shook their heads. No, let's wait for Mom. As they said that, the 2 little guys cast their pitiful eyes towards the kitchen again, expecting their mother to come out earlier. Although it seemed to take a lot of time, in fact, it only took a few minutes. Even Qin's father and Li Jianhua were not disturbed at all, and were holding their teacups and drinking them all. After putting down the teacup, Qin's father remembered what he had been looking forward to for a long time, and asked, Xiaoxiu, you take Lei and the others to ride ponies, what about us? How to arrange it? Dad, it depends on what you want to play. Kinzu smiled and filled up the two people's cups again, put down the exquisite purple clay teapot in his hand, and then said, "We do have a lot of things to play here, such as riding horses, shooting guns, fishing, and shooting fish." Counting on his fingers, Kinzu counted the things to play one by one, but was surprised to find that there were really a lot of things to play here. No wonder he didn't feel bored. Riding horses is not bad, but can you shoot guns here? Hearing that you can still shoot guns in the ranch, King's father was even more energetic. Although he is still sitting steadily on the sofa now, his mind is all flying outside. God knows, the last time he touched a gun was more than 10 years ago. Since the guns were confiscated, he has never had the opportunity to touch this thing again. Unexpectedly, he still has this opportunity when he is old. Chapter 790a. Strong Little Man. Although Keen's father was very willing to shoot and was very interested in shooting. But when Keen's mother and Keen Wan came back from cleaning up that kitchen, they protested with dissatisfaction. "Dad, you were going to shoot now, who will teach us to ride horses?" "That's right, Dad, when you came here, you were bragging that no one could beat you in riding horses. Why don't you go riding horses first?" Faced with the double pressure of his wife and daughter, he had to smile bitterly and surrender. Okay, let's go riding horses, not shooting." Seeing that Keen's father compromised, Keen Wan and the little girl who suddenly appeared beside him immediately began to high-five to celebrate. While they were talking, Kinzu was watching on the side, and he didn't say anything. But when they reached an agreement, Kinzu came out again. "Dad, if you want to shoot, I'll let Dale come and teach you. She's from the Special Forces." As soon as Kinzu finished speaking, Keen Wan and Keen Ru immediately glared at him, as if they were saying it again, "I'll stare you to death." "Don't worry, sister, little sister, don't worry, someone will definitely teach you how to ride a horse." As she said that, she waved to Zumengyu and said with a smile, "Yo-yo, call everyone over and gather at the stable." When Kinzu led a large group of people and rushed to the stable, a row of heroic foreign horses were already standing in front of the luxurious stable. "Oh my god, shucks you, are these your bodyguards?" Now, let alone Keen's mother, even Li Jianhua stared at Kinzu in surprise, as if he couldn't believe his eyes. There are 12 women, and they all have good figures, which can be called model figures. "Are you sure they are bodyguards?" Kinzu touched his nose involuntarily. He also felt that the situation in front of him seemed a little wrong, right? However, wasn't he doing this for everyone to learn to ride a horse quickly? Yes, I'm doing this for everyone's good, and they should thank me. Thinking of this, Kinzu became more calm and went forward to greet Erica. "Hi, Erica, how is everyone preparing?" Erica nodded and said with a smile, "Boss, the horses are ready, and they are all the most docile ones." Kinzu smiled with satisfaction and waved to the back. "Okay, everyone come over and choose your own horses. We will choose the horses in the morning and then try riding them." After hearing Kinzu's words, everyone who was still in a daze just now rushed in excitedly. There was no way, compared to caring about other people's gossip, they were more concerned about their own affairs. However, when several women of different sizes rushed into the stable, they immediately became disappointed. "Ah, brother, why are the horses here only these two colors?" Kinru pouted her little mouth and grumbled very dissatisfiedly. "Which two?" Kinzu followed him inside and saw that the horses that Erica jumped out of were really like this. These guys were either all satin black or all chestnut, there was not even a spotted horse, let alone other colors. "Ha. Horses are for riding, why do you care so much about its color? You're not going out." After laughing dryly twice, Kinzu couldn't think of any good reason, so he quickly changed the subject. But what he didn't expect was that just after he sent his little sister to pick a horse, there was a little trouble over there. Uncle. Lady, who was wearing a small down jacket, stood beside Kinzu, shook Kinzu's arm with his little hands, tilted his little head and asked, "Didn't you say that we would ride ponies today?" Kinzu nodded, and replied very calmly, "Yeah, don't worry, I'll let the pony out right away." Lady Lei blinked his big eyes, held Kinzu's hand tightly, and continued to ask, "But there is only one horse, how can the two of us ride it?" Kinzu came back to his senses, looked down at the little guy beside him, and said with a smile, "It seems that you are waiting for your uncle here." After a pause, he thought about it. Snowflower was originally bought for Shirley, and letting the two little guys ride it now is just an emergency. Besides, it is really not convenient for two little guys to ride one horse. Considering this, Kinzu looked over there and saw the people who are still choosing horses in a daze, and said with a smile, Okay, don't worry, Uncle will take you to buy 2 more ponies later, how about it? Before Lei could agree, he heard Li Jianhua's voice behind him. No, it's such a waste. After a pause, he came in front of the 2 of them, looked at his brother-in-law, and shook his head. He said helplessly, Xiao Yu, don't spoil them too much. A pony costs a lot of money, so forget it. Hearing what his father said, Lady Lei's mouth sank, and he felt so aggrieved. Obviously his uncle was going to give it to him, why didn't his father want it? Children of this age can't understand the twists and turns between adults. In their opinion, since it is given, just take it. At most, they say thank you, and they never refuse other people's kindness. This is also one of the reasons why many children are always punished by their father or mother when they are young, right? Brother-in-law, you are too polite to say this. Qinzu ignored Li Jianhua on the side, but squatted down, wiped the corners of Lei's eyes with a smile, and teased. Our little man will not shed tears. After a pause and a look at Tongton not far away, Qinzu pretended to be mysterious, and whispered in Lei's ear. Let's ignore your dad, and your uncle will take you to buy a pony later, okay? Lei's eyes lit up when he heard it, but when he looked at Li Jianhua standing next to him, his mouth sank and he shook his head silently. If I don't go, my dad will be angry. Qinzu rolled his eyes helplessly. This damn kid, why haven't I seen you so obedient usually? Looking back at Li Jianhua helplessly, Qinzu smiled bitterly and said, Look at you, you scared the child, what are you doing here, why don't you pick a horse to practice on yourself? Listening to his brother-in-law's complaints, Li Jianhua also smiled bigly. Is this the sadness of having a brother-in-law who is too good? It is obvious that he is doing this for the good of the children and not letting them be too spoiled. But when it comes to his brother-in-law, he becomes meddling. Seeing that Lei was about to cry, Li Jianhua waved his hand, turned around and walked to the other side. I don't care, it's up to you, Xiaoxiu, remember not to buy too expensive. Qinzu smiled, agreed loudly, turned his head to look at Lei, stretched out his hand and pinched his little face. Okay, our little man is the strongest, don't cry. Chapter 791 Uncle Qin's Child. Beep beep on the spacious and empty interstate highway, a loud and rapid horn sounded from far to near. In the middle of the road, a group of reindeer foraging for food raised their heads calmly, wanting to see who was blind enough to disturb them while they were eating. 2 safety seats were placed in the back seat of a slowly stopping Porsche Cayenne. Lady Lei looked through the car window at the group of reindeer in front of him, and suddenly burst into a cry of surprise. Uncle, look, dear, that's a Sika deer. Sika deer? Qinzu's head was sweating a little. He stopped the car and continued to honk the horn. He turned around and was about to speak, but heard Tongton on the other side loudly retort. That's not a Sika deer, that's a giraffe. Don't you see how long their necks are? As she said that, the little girl looked at Qinzu with a smug look on her face. Uncle, don't you think so? Yes. It's you, you big-headed ghost. Qinzu complained silently in his heart, then pointed at the group of deer in front of him, which finally began to move slowly, and said with a smile. That's not a Sika deer, nor a giraffe, it's called a reindeer. Reindeer. The 2 little guys looked at each other, and there was a hint of confusion in their eyes. Qinzu nodded, and just when he was about to explain what the reindeer road was, he heard a loud car horn from the side. Hey, Qin, where are you going? A silver-white pickup truck stopped beside Qinzu's Porsche, and the window slowly lowered. Old York's wrinkled smiling face appeared in front of Qinzu. What a coincidence, Old York, I was just about to go to your place. Qinzu also smiled and lowered the window, and chatted loudly with Old York in the pickup truck. Oh, really? Old York looked at Qinzu in surprise, but seeing that the reindeer in front had almost gone, he smiled and waved. Then let's go together, we'll talk when we get to the ranch. After saying that, he stepped on the accelerator, and the silver-white pickup truck rushed out with a roar. Qinzu smiled and rolled up the car window, then started the car and followed. Uncle, you haven't told me yet, what is a reindeer, how come it looks the same as a Sika deer? Rolling his eyes, Qinzu said helplessly. Lily, who told you that this deer looks the same as a Sika deer? Are they different? The little guy stretched his head to the window, staring at the slowly disappearing herd of reindeer on the side of the road, and mentally compared the reindeer in front of him with the deer in the pictures he saw at home. There's no difference, Uncle, tell me, what's the difference? Pouted his little mouth, Lily stared at his uncle with big eyes, wanting him to give him an explanation. Qinzu had no choice but to slow down the car and start to persuade him. Lily, look at their horns, aren't they bigger than those of Seeker deer? And don't Seeker deer have white spots on their bodies? Reindeer don't have them. Lily blinked his big eyes, looked at Tomten in confusion, and asked, Uncle, Tomten's hair is longer than mine, and aren't the clothes she wears different from mine? Crack. Kinzu heard the words, and the steering wheel in his hand was unstable, and he almost drove that car into the ditch. Looking back at Lily, who looked serious, Kinzu decided not to talk to him, otherwise the old driver would also be at risk of overturning. Soon, the Porsche arrived at Old York's ranch amid Lily's doubts, Tomten's confusion, and Kinzu's helpless mood. Clean, my dear friend, long time no see. I heard that you went back to celebrate the New Year. Happy New Year. Kinzu had just parked the car, opened the door and walked out, when he was hugged by the enthusiastic Old York, who said a lot of nonsense like a machine gun. Patting Old York on the back, Kinzu quickly let go of his hand and said with a smile, Old York, Happy New Year, you are getting fatter and fatter. That's right, I can't let myself lose weight. Proudly sticking out his big belly, Old York with a bright smile on his face, pulled Kinzu and wanted to walk into the villa. Let's go inside and talk about it. It's really cold outside. By the way, why didn't you bring your 2 hot female bodyguards here today? As he said that, the guy winked at Kinzu and showed a smile that all men understand. Kinzu withdrew his hand with some embarrassment, and said with a wry smile, they all have something to do today. Besides, I didn't come alone today. In the surprised eyes of Old York, Kinzu turned around, opened the car door, and carried that curious Tomten and Lily out from inside. Old York, these 2 are my nephew and niece. They just came from China. After Kinzu introduced Old John, he said to the 2 little guys in Chinese, Tomten, Lily, this is Old Grandpa York, go and say hello to him. Tomten and Lily stood up obediently after hearing that, and called sweetly to the golden-haired guy in a denim suit in front of them, hello, Grandpa York. Although Old York didn't understand what the 2 little guys were saying, he could still understand the general meaning. He smiled and walked forward to touch the heads of the 2 little guys. What a pair of lovely little angels, Clean, you are so happy. Kinzu shrugged helplessly, took the 2 little guys by the hand, and followed Old York in, but said, what happiness. These 2 little devils are so naughty. They make me worry at all. It would be great if they could be as sensible as little Lucy. Hearing Kinzu praising his little granddaughter, the smile on Old York's face became even brighter. But he said modestly, Clean, you don't know, Lucy is not honest either. When she is naughty, she is very troublesome. As they were talking, they entered the villa, and Old York's words were heard clearly by a little girl in the villa. Before he could ask Kinzu to sit down, Old York felt that there was another person beside him, and he heard a dissatisfied and coquettish voice in his ears. Grandpa, how am I naughty? Old York turned around and saw his granddaughter Lucy standing beside him, staring at him with her big eyes. It seemed that if he didn't say anything, the girl would make trouble with him. Old York was confused, wondering how could he forget that the girl was still at home. His eyes rolled around and he saw 2 small figures looking at them curiously. He was delighted and quickly changed the subject. Little Lucy, come here, Grandpa will introduce you to 2 new friends. They are your Uncle Keen's children, and they just came from the mysterious East. Uncle Keen's children. From the mysterious East. The little girl was really attracted by Old York's words, and her eyes couldn't help but look at the 2 small figures beside Kinzu. Si est escuchando esta novela en un canal distinto a mundo fanfic novelas, significat lo descarga and y subir en sinisfuerzos invitamos cordialmente a visitar nuestro canal. Mundo fanfic novelas all encontrás la versión original de esta historia y podrás explorar muchas otras novelas de diversos narradores. Te esperamos para sumergirte en un mundo de novelas incredibles. Chapter 792 Old York's Surrenders. What do you mean, my child? Kinzu looked at the fat old man in front of him who was not responsible at all. These are my nephew and niece, my sister's children. Yes. Old York looked at him innocently and shrugged. They are your children, is there anything wrong with that? No way. Kinzu understood that the old guy was just making a joke and wanted to divert little Lucy's attention to himself. However, how could he let this guy do what he wanted? Kinzu smiled and looked at the little girl in front of him who was not even as high as his thigh. He sat on the sofa next to him and waved at her. Lucy still had a good impression of this Uncle Keen. She knew that his family had a big house and there was a rockery in front of the door to play. Seeing Kinzu waving at her, the little girl ran over to give face, leaned against Kinzu, and looked up at his little face waiting for Kinzu to speak. "Little Lucy, I haven't seen you for so long. You are still so cute. Why does your grandpa always say you are naughty?" Hearing the first half of the sentence, Lucy's little face was full of smiles, thinking that Uncle Keen's words were really nice. But when she heard the second half of the sentence, Lucy immediately remembered that her grandpa was still saying bad things about her just now. Hey, Keen, you can't do this." Old York got anxious when he heard it, and waved his hands at Kinzu repeatedly, and one hand subconsciously touched his little mustache. Thinking back to the beginning, he also had a thick mustache. But since his little granddaughter grew up, his mustache has become less and less. "Ha, Old York, you said it yourself. I didn't do anything, right, little Lucy?" Kinzu glanced at Old York proudly, and blinked at little Lucy in his arms, making the little girl giggle. "Okay, Keen, you in." Shrugging his shoulders, Old York also sat on the sofa. Looking at Tomten and Lily, who were not afraid of strangers at all, but looked around curiously, he asked with a smile, "Tell me, you are not coming to my place just for a visit this time, right?" "What else?" Kinzu put little Lucy down and waved at Tomten and Lily, motioning them to come and sit down. "I don't believe it." Old York shook his head, hugged his little granddaughter, kept dodging the raised little hand, and said in a panic, "Damn it, Keen, if you have anything to say, just say it quickly. I have to find a place to hide." Ha. Kinzu looked at Old York's embarrassed look and laughed happily. When he saw this guy stand up and prepare to go out, he hurriedly said, "Old York, don't worry, I remember you should have a few ponies, right?" "Yes, there are a few." After answering subconsciously, Old York finally reacted and pointed at Tomten and Lily with a smile. "So you came to buy horses for these two little guys? What else?" Kinzu stood up and spread his hands helplessly. "Tell me, why do you want to raise this kind of pony? It's not only expensive, but also very impractical." Hearing this, Old York nodded in agreement. "You're right, this thing is indeed expensive, and it's not very practical." At this point, he changed the subject, laughed at Kinzu, and said, "Keen, but you can't deny that it sells well, right?" "Okay." Kinzu spread his hands. He had to admit that what this guy said made sense. As long as there are children in the ranch, this kind of pony is basically indispensable. After all, children are everything, and there are very few people who don't like children. And the preferences of children can determine the consumption concepts of adults. Otherwise, how can there be a saying that the money of women and children is the easiest to make? This sentence really makes sense. The preferences of children can determine the consumption concepts of adults, and the preferences of women can determine the consumption concepts of men. Although Old York dotes on Lucy, when there is business coming to the door, he will still focus on business. He handed the pouting little Lucy to the little York who had just returned from outside, and Old York drove his silver pickup truck, took Kinzu and the two little guys to his stable. "Hey, this car is nice. Is it new?" Kinzu asked curiously, looking at the sharp-edged shape of the pickup truck and the slightly rough decoration inside the car. "Of course." Old York stepped on the accelerator hard, feeling the pickup truck roaring in the ranch. He introduced with a smile, "The latest product of Dodge. It cost me a full $130,000. That's really not cheap." Kinzu just sighed and stopped talking. The pickup trucks on his ranch are enough, and $130,000 to buy a pickup truck is really not cheap. Soon, the pickup truck stopped next to the stable. Kinzu got out first, and then got down to carry the little guys one by one. When Kinzu carried the little guys out of the car, Old York also opened the door of the stable, and the four of them walked in directly. It stinks. As soon as they entered, a strange smell hit them in the face, causing Tomten and Lily to cover their noses involuntarily. Kinzu couldn't help but frown slightly. It might be because of the winter. Old York was afraid that the horses would get frostbite, so the ventilation in the stable was not very good. In this regard, the stable in Kinzu's ranch could not be compared. Although his stable would also strengthen the warmth in winter, the ventilation was still very good, and there would not be too much smell in the stable. Of course, there would still be some slight odors. After all, there was a group of livestock living there. Old York seemed to have been prepared. He took out a bag of disposable masks from the side and gave one to each person. Kinzu helped the two little guys put on the masks, and quickly put them on himself, and then he felt better. "Ha, Clean, you really don't look like a rancher." Old York smiled and shook his head, as if he found it very funny that Kinzu couldn't stand the smell here. Kinzu followed behind and walked in. Although he felt a little ashamed, he refused to say anything. He retorted, "Old York, you're wrong. Do ranchers have to work on the front line? Do you think that as the boss of a courier company, you will personally deliver goods?" Old York was choked by this and was speechless for a long time. After a long time, he smiled bitterly and shook his head. "Okay, Clean, you win. Orientals are really good at talking." No, Kinzu waved his hands repeatedly. "Old York, this has nothing to do with whether you're an Oriental or not. It's just a fact, isn't it?" Okay. Old York raised his hands helplessly. "I surrender, okay? Let's go see the pony you need, right? Thank you Lovecom for the 500 starting coins reward, thank you I want to wake up the world for the reward support, and thank you Tycoon for the 3000 book coins reward. The new year is coming soon. I hope that book friends can continue to support Leoon. Bowen, thank you." Chapter 793 Kinzu's Craftsmanship. Hurry up. Above the vast pasture, there were dots of white clouds floating. Under the messy white clouds of various shapes, 2 small ponies were moving slowly. Oh, no. There were 3. Although there was no little figure on one of the ponies. You just know how to spend money recklessly. These 2 horses are not cheap, right? Kinwan looked at her 2 children playing together not far away, and then looked at her brother who was smiling beside her. She felt a little grateful in her heart, but she complained a little. "Sister, it didn't cost much." Kinzu waved his hand casually. He would not tell his sister that these 2 ponies alone cost him nearly $80,000. Yes, the 2 came from Shetland Island in northeastern Scotland, UK, Shetland ponies. One was satin black, and the other was white with a little spot. It cost him more than $70,000 in total. Of course, the unit price is still a little different from that of snowflakes. This is mainly because of the difference in bloodline. After all, Zhui's ancestors were all horse nobles with excellent bloodliness. Moreover, compared with the Australian miniature horse, the Shetland pony is overall more robust. The reason why the Shetland pony was chosen was because Kinzu was afraid that the 2 little guys would be too hard-working and break the slender Australian miniature horse. By the way, how were you learning? Seeing that his sister wanted to say something, Kinzu quickly shifted the topic to them. Sure enough, when talking about this, Kinwan forgot about whether the pony was expensive or not, and said excitedly, "I learned very quickly. Now I can ride a horse and walk slowly." As she said that, Kinwan took a chestnut-colored quarter horse beside her, put 1 foot into the stirrup, and was about to climb onto the horse. Stop. Before his sister could make a move, Kinzu grabbed her and asked with a smile, "Sister, who taught you to ride a horse? Don't you even know the posture to get on a horse?" "My dad taught me." Kinwan looked back at Kinzu in confusion and asked in confusion, "What's wrong? What posture do you need to get on a horse?" Kinzu didn't say anything, but waved to Erica next to him. "Erica, didn't I tell you to teach them how to ride a horse? Why don't you even teach them the posture to get on a horse?" Erica shrugged innocently and said with a distressed look, "Boss, if you let me teach them how to use a gun, I am very confident that I can teach them all kinds of skills, but I really don't know how to ride a horse." Kinzu touched his nose and then reacted. It is true that Erica and the other girls are special forces soldiers and know a lot of things. But now it is a mechanized war after all. They are good at flying planes and tanks, but riding a horse is really not their strong point. "Okay, where's Eva? Why don't I see her?" Kinzu turned around to find Eva, the traditional cowgirl, to teach everyone, but after a round, he didn't see Eva. "Sister Eva went to ride with the lady," Erica answered on the side. "What about Mengyo? Where did Mengyo go?" Kinzu wanted to find Zhu Mengyo again. This girl's horse riding skills are also very good. "Zhu went to ride with the lady," Erica answered again standing aside. But, the title was obviously learned from the movie. Okay. Kinzu felt that he came back at a very bad time. Why are all these free teachers gone? "Sister, remember, before getting on the horse, you must not put your feet completely into the stirrups." Kinzu had no choice but to wave his hand to let his brother-in-law come over and give them a basic teaching again. It was not until almost noon that Eva and the beautiful Zhu, then Kin's mother and the little girl returned to the villa. "Oh, I'm so tired. I don't want to ride a horse again." Kinru, who was so excited just now, didn't want to get up again as soon as she returned to the villa and lay on the soft leather sofa. She now felt that her two thin legs were no longer her own, and they were painful and sore. She didn't feel anything when she was on the horse, but now she can hardly walk after getting off the horse. If Zumengyo hadn't supported her, it's not certain whether the little girl could walk into the house by herself. Kinzu let go of Betty, who was lazily lying under the porch to bask in the sun, and asked with a smile, "How is it?" "Little girl, is horse riding fun?" Kinru shook her head at first, thought for a while, and then nodded. Before Kinzu, who was somewhat puzzled, could ask, the little girl explained with a bitter face, "Riding a horse is fun, but it is too tiring, and it is easy to hurt your legs. You need to practice more on your own." Kinzu smiled and washed his hands, comforting, "You'll get used to it. I used to be like this too. By the way, where is Dad?" Sitting on the sofa, Kinzu looked around. His sister and brother-in-law had also returned, and his mother and younger sister had also returned. Only his father was still missing, and he could not help but feel a little worried. He hasn't ridden enough yet. He said he would come back after riding for a while. Kin's mother sat on the sofa on the other side, rubbing her thighs and casually responded. Kinzu was relieved, looked up at his mother, and asked with a smile, "Mom, you look like you can't cook for lunch, right? How about I make something?" Kin's mother heard this, but waved her hand. "With your cooking skills, how dare I eat it? It's okay, just take a break." Kinzu, who wanted to show off his cooking skills in front of his parents, was hit hard by his mother's words. What does it mean to dare to eat? Auntie, Kinzu's dishes are delicious. Eva's personality is more straightforward. After understanding what Kin's mother said, she couldn't help but refute it. "Yes, Auntie, Xiaozu's cooking skills are really good. Didn't he learn it from you?" The beautiful Zhu also spoke at this time, but she was a little confused. Didn't Kinzu learn his cooking skills from his family? Even his family didn't know that he could cook. Then, who did Kinzu learn his cooking skills from? Is he self-taught? It's unlikely, right? He used to live alone outside. Does he cook for himself every day when he goes home to practice? It has to be said that women are sensitive and a little suspicious. Based on a few simple conversations between Kinzu and Kin's mother, she can think of so many things in her mind. Fortunately, she was just thinking about it in her mind and didn't ask right away. Instead, she spoke well at Kinzu. Kinzu, on the other hand, didn't understand women's complicated thoughts at all, and didn't think about it at all. After hearing his mother questioning his cooking skills, he became interested and wanted to show off his presence in front of his parents. "Mom, you just sit here today and watch me show you my skills." After saying this to Kin's mother with a smile, Kinzu stood up and walked towards the kitchen. He wanted to see what ingredients were left at home and think about what to cook for lunch. At this weekend, the end of the month, and the end of the year, the 3Ms are concentrated on a special day, and I will add more chapters to ask for subscriptions and rewards. Extra chapters for the leader who rides a pig to the grassland, 18/20, chapter 794 missing. What disappointed Kinzu was that there was no shortage of meat or anything in the kitchen, but there were almost no vegetables. Holding a basket, Kinzu came to the living room and said with a smile, "Mom, you guys sit down for a while, I'll go get some vegetables." Kin's mother waved her hand with a puzzled look on her face, looking at Kinzu's back, and she was wondering in her heart, could this kid really cook? Ding-ling-ling-ling-ling. Just when she was a little confused, she heard her cell phone ringing quickly. Just as she walked out of the door and hadn't reached the vegetable garden, Kinzu heard a hurried call from behind. Xiaozu turning his head, he saw his sister and brother-in-law running towards him in a hurry. What's wrong? Kinzu was a little confused. Did they want to eat something, especially vegetables? Just when he was about to ask, he heard his sister's tone with a hint of anxiety. "Xiaozu, our dad is lost, please ask someone to find him." What the hell? Lost? Kinzu was a little dazed, and even suspected that there was something wrong with his ears. His mother and younger sister were not lost, but his father, an old driver, was lost. Yes, he was lost. Kinwan was also speechless, and couldn't understand why her father got lost when even her mother came back. However, what they didn't consider was that both Kin's mother and Kinru had people following them. After Kin's father and mother separated, he was alone, galloping on this vast pasture. It would be strange if he didn't get lost. Let's go back quickly, it's still early. After Kinzu came to his senses, he was not in a hurry. It was broad daylight, he was just lost, and there were so many people on his side. When he arrived at the villa, Kinzu picked up his mobile phone and called Erica first, asking her to take people to search in the direction his father was going. After Erica expressed that she understood, Kinzu called Old John again. After the call was connected, Kinzu said directly, "Old John, let all the idle cowboys come out and wander around the ranch to see if they can meet a nation." "Okay, I understand." After agreeing neatly, Old John asked with some confusion, "Boss, you're back? What happened?" Hearing this, Kinzu touched his nose awkwardly, and said with a wry smile, "I just came back yesterday, nothing serious, it's just that my family came here with me. This morning when I was riding horses on the ranch, my father accidentally got lost and hasn't come back yet." Wiping the cold sweat from his forehead, Old John felt a little regretful. Why did he say so much? Well, the ranch is indeed quite big. It's normal that you can't find the way without someone to lead you. Don't worry, I'll let the cowboys go out to look for it now. After the call was hung up, Kinzu thought about it for a while, then picked up the phone and called Will. "Hi, Will, have the 2 helicopters arrived at the ranch?" "They arrived a few days ago." Will agreed, and then asked with some surprise, "Boss, you're back?" "Yes, I just came back yesterday," Kinzu said, and then asked, "Then can anyone fly the 2 helicopters now?" "Of course. Boss, Simon now flies a helicopter to cruise around the sea every day." "Going on a cruise every day?" Kinzu's mouth twitched. "This guy doesn't even know how to save me some money. Do you think aviation fuel is cheap? But now is not the time to think about this." Kinzu just paused and told Will what happened just now. "No problem, boss." Hearing this, Will patted his chest and said, "I'll let them go now and guarantee that they will find that person in the shortest time." Kinzu hummed, hung up the phone, and followed his sister back to the villa. "Xiao Yu, what should we do? How did your dad get lost? Will he be okay?" As soon as he entered the door, Kin's mother's somewhat anxious voice came into Kinzu's ears. "Mom, don't worry." Kinzu smiled and pressed Kin's mother to sit on the sofa. "He's just lost. It's still so light now. What can happen?" After a pause, seeing that Kin's mother's emotions had stabilized a little, he continued, "Besides, I've already asked people to go out to look for him, and someone is flying a plane to look for him. Don't worry." After hearing what Kinzu said, Kin's mother finally felt relieved and complained, "Your dad is really something, just like you, he only knows how to show off, just let it go." Kinzu, who was blamed for no reason, had to pretend that he didn't hear his mother's complaints, stood up and said with a smile, "Mom, you should have a good rest at home, I will go out to look for it." "I'll go too, take me with you." "Brother, I want to go too." "Shucks you, I'll go with you too." Listening to several voices that sounded at the same time, Kinzu waved his hand, "Mom, you and your younger sister should stay at home, and you too, sister, I'll go with my brother-in-law." "No, I want to go with you." The younger sister Kinru grumbled dissatisfiedly. "Can you still ride a horse?" Kinzu turned his head and looked at the little girl, with an expression that said, "If you can do it, I will take you with me." I. The little girl wanted to say that she could do it, but feeling the pain in her thigh, she backed off a little. "You, just stay at home with Mom, we're enough," Kinzu said, and walked upstairs without raising his head. Halfway up, he saw his brother-in-law still standing stupidly downstairs, and couldn't help shouting, "Brother-in-law, come up." Upon hearing this, Li Jianhua greeted Kin's mother and wife, and followed with some confusion. After a while, with a roar, the little girl lying on the sofa suddenly exploded. "Ah, bad brother, stinky brother, didn't you agree to ride a horse? Why are you flying a plane?" "Okay, be honest," Kin's mother glared at her daughter unhappily. However, she was also a little dissatisfied with her son for daring to fool her. Only Kinwan felt a little regretful. When the brat went upstairs, she felt something was wrong, but before she could react, the plane took off. Thinking of the plane, she envied her husband. She also wanted to ride such a small plane. On the helicopter that had just flown away from the villa, Li Jianhua looked around at the gradually shrinking villa below, and asked with a bit of a smile, "Xiao Yu, since you were flying a plane, why don't you bring my little sister and our mother with you?" Kinzu curled his lips after hearing this. "As for that little girl, how can we be quiet if we bring her along? We are not out to play." Li Jianhua thought about his little sister's lively personality, and nodded in agreement. However, he seemed to suddenly think of something, and he said with some gloating, That's what you said, but when you go back, it will be a bit miserable, right? Chapter 795 Can't find it. Kinzu waved his hand disapprovingly, looking down through the window, and casually responded, "It's okay, at worst I can take her flying alone." "Do you think she will be angry?" "No." Li Jianhua was a little embarrassed. As expected of a brother and sister, they really understand each other well. The two did not speak again, but followed the helicopter forward and looked carefully along both sides of the road. This is also thanks to Dale's excellent driving skills, so he can fly not far from the ground. If you don't believe it, look at the two helicopters next to him, they are always flying high. Kinzu's eyes involuntarily cast on the two helicopters not far away. The four glittering Chinese characters on the fuselage are particularly dazzling under the reflection of the sun. Dekin Mana no 1. Dekin Mana no 2. Nodding with satisfaction, Kinzu retracted his gaze and continued to look for his father's figure. 1 minute, 5 minutes. 10 minutes. Half an hour. Kinzu's forehead began to sweat. What's going on? The ranch had been almost completely searched, but there was still no sign of his father. Ding-ling-ling, a rapid ring of the cell phone made Kinzu's heart tighten. He took out his cell phone and saw that it was his mother calling. Kinzu picked up the phone directly and asked in a very relaxed tone, "Mom, what's wrong? What's the matter?" Xiao, haven't you found him yet? Your dad's cell phone can't be reached. Nothing will happen, right? Mom's tone was full of worry. The cell phone can't be reached. Kinzu's heart skipped a beat, and he suddenly had a bad premonition. However, thinking that his mother was still waiting for his reply, he suppressed the bad feeling in his heart and said with a smile, "What could have happened? Maybe it was out of battery, or maybe the phone was lost. After all, he rides a horse very fast, and if the phone is lost, it will be lost." Kin's mother thought about it and felt a little relieved, but still instructed, "Then you should look for it quickly, I will try again." After hanging up the phone, Kinzu felt a little irritated, and his eyes kept scanning the empty pasture below. At this time, he felt for the first time that a big pasture was not a good thing. "Xiao, you have almost walked around the pasture, right?" Li Jianhua retracted his gaze, rubbed his sore eyes, and asked worriedly. "Yes, it's almost done." Kinzu dealt with his brother-in-law's questions carelessly, but his eyes were fixed on the ground, as if there was something on it that was always attracting him. Li Jianhua opened his mouth, but said nothing, and turned his eyes to the ground and continued to search. 40 minutes, 45 minutes, 50 minutes. "Hey, what's that?" Li Jianhua's exclamation made Kinzu, who was concentrating on looking outside, tremble all over and almost jump up. "What's wrong, brother-in-law?" Kinzu quickly unbuckled his seatbelt, left his seat, and leaned in front of the window on Li Jianhua's side. "Xiao, look over there, is there a horse?" Li Jianhua also unbuckled his seatbelt, stretched out a hand and pointed outside the window, signaling Kinzu to look over there. Following the direction of Li Jianhua's finger, Kinzu also saw a small black dot at the foot of a small hill. After a closer look, it was indeed a horse. A satin black quarter. Kinzu first picked up the headset and told Dale, then he couldn't wait to pick up the phone and call his mother. "Mom, was the color of the horse that Dad rode this morning satin black?" "What do you mean satin black?" Kin's mother was stunned for a moment, and then nodded repeatedly with some excitement. Yes, it's that black satin, all black." Kinzu smiled when he heard that. Hearing that his mother was a little excited, he quickly comforted her. "Mom, it's okay, don't worry, we'll find Dad soon." Before he hung up the phone, Kinzu felt the fuselage shaking. He knew that the helicopter had landed. "Okay, Mom, let's not talk about it for now. I'll go and take a look." After hanging up the phone, Kinzu walked straight down through the already opened door. Li Jianhua saw this and hurriedly ran down. When he got downstairs, he found that his brother-in-law was already standing with two foreign big horses with curvy bodies, talking about something. Moreover, they all had guns in their hands. Yes, what Kinzu was holding in his hand was a Remington shotgun. He liked this kind of high-powered hunting rifle very much, so even on the helicopter, he was specially equipped with one. "Brother-in-law, just stay up there and don't come down yet." Kinzu waved at Li Jianhua, who was standing stupidly in front of the helicopter door, picked up the Remington, and walked towards the foot of the mountain. Li Jianhua opened his mouth but remained silent. After all, bullets don't have eyes. If something happens, it will be too late to regret. Dale was in front, I was behind, and Kinzu was in the middle. The three of them lined up in a straight line and walked towards the quarter horse that was leisurely eating grass. While walking, Dale's sharp eyes were still scanning. She didn't stop until she walked in front of the satin black quarter horse, stretched out her hand and gently stroked the horse's big head, shook her head and said, "Boss, it's safe here, there is no danger." Kinzu breathed a sigh of relief. Since there was no danger, that was the best result. But now the problem is here again. Since there is no danger and the horse is fine, what about her father? Turning around and looking up, Kinzu looked around and found that this place seemed familiar. Well, I must have been here before, but I just can't remember where it is. At this time, a breeze blew gently, brushing over the bodies of several people, and then flew away. Dale's cute little ears moved involuntarily, and then she leaned her head to Kinzu's ear and whispered, "Boss, there seems to be movement on the mountain." Huh. Kinzu looked up at the hill, which seemed to be a remnant of the Appalachian Mountains. The mountain is not high, and it is not steep at all. Just now on the plain, Kinzu looked carefully. Surrounded by the Appalachian Mountains, surrounded by mountains, this is just a smaller slope. However, when Kinzu really stood in front of him, he had to raise his head and look up at it. Because, no matter how short it is still a mountain after all. Let's go up and take a look. Kinzu's voice was also very low, and I don't know if he was afraid of alerting the enemy or something. After saying this, several people crouched down and walked up the mountain with extremely brisk steps. Before they had walked far, Dale's ears moved again. He stopped and turned his head to look at Kinzu behind him. "Boss, it's confirmed that the person is inside." Chapter 796a. False alarm. Kinzu didn't say anything, but just turned on the safety of the Remington in his hand. With a few rustling sounds, Kinzu and his companions walked forward again. This is, when they walked up the hillside and came to a large iron gate, Kinzu was a little dumbfounded. At this time, he finally remembered where this place was. Isn't this the form of Inuit in the manor? In the past, grapes and other fruits were grown here. It can be said that it is the orchard in that Tycoon manor. Creaking, the rusty iron gate was slowly pushed open, and Kinzu and his companions walked in slowly. "Are you sure you heard it right?" Kinzu didn't quite believe that his father would be here. Although this was an orchard in that past, the grapevines here have long been abandoned because of lack of care for many years. "That's right." Dale walked in front to lead the way, and said without looking back, "The iron gate was not locked just now, and there are signs of opening." "Yes." Elsa followed behind, and her face was no longer nervous at this moment. From all the signs, she was sure that her boss's father would not be in any danger, and that he must have left the horse on his own initiative. Kinzu nodded, looked around, and shouted loudly, "Dad, are you in there?" Obviously, he also knew that he was too nervous. Think about it, the ranch is so big, even if there are bad guys, the probability of encountering them is very small. Kinzu was not discouraged when he did not get a response after shouting. After listening for a while, he continued to walk forward, shouting as he walked. Sure enough, when Kinzu shouted for the third time, a faint response finally came from inside. "Here, I'm here." "Boss, over there." Dale pointed in a direction, and the three of them ran over quickly. After bypassing several dead vines, Kinzu and the other two suddenly saw a clear view. It turned out that behind the row of vines was a large area of fruit trees. Although it was the coldest time of the year, green buds had already appeared on the fruit trees. "Xiao Zhu, you're here." Father Keen was walking back and forth under the fruit trees with his hands behind his back, not showing any sign of nervousness. Seeing this, Kinzu couldn't help but feel a little angry. He walked forward a few steps and muttered unhappily, "Dad, do you know that Mom is going crazy? Isn't it just a lost road? Why is she so anxious?" Father Keen waved his hands disapprovingly and said with some emotion, "I also found that this large territory really has its disadvantages." Covering his forehead, Kinzu found that he was actually a little speechless. He couldn't help but change the subject and asked, "Let's not talk about this, Dad. What's wrong with your phone? Why can't I get through?" "Can't get through?" Father Keen took out his phone from his pocket and turned it on. He asked with some confusion, "I'm fine, why can't I get through?" Kinzu felt like he was going crazy. What the hell was going on? "Boss, let's go back first. Madam is probably waiting anxiously." Seeing that Kinzu wanted to say something, Dale reminded him quickly. Yes, look at my memory." Kinzu picked up his phone and called his mother. A moment later, in the spacious and luxurious living room, on the Mediterranean-style leather sofa, Kinzu's family sat together. Look at you. You can get lost even when riding a horse. Kin's mother stared at him hard, and Kin's father, who lowered his head and said nothing, looked like he was crying because of your stupidity. How could I know I would get lost? The ranch is so big, I can't find that direction while walking. Kin's father's voice was a little weak. From the moment he saw the helicopter, he knew that there was a big problem. In particular, when he saw a group of people riding horses back with his own eyes, he felt even more guilty. Because he knew that they were all sent by his son to find him. Although he was proud of his son's ability to command so many people, he also understood that he had caused trouble for his son. Of course, these are not the most important. It is natural to trouble his own son. The main reason is that he makes the whole family worry about him. And Kin's mother was obviously very dissatisfied with Kin's father's answer. Well, I got lost, and now I blame my son's ranch for being too big. Just when she was about to continue to say something, she was interrupted by Kinzu's sudden interruption. Dad, why can't you get through on your phone? Kinzu put down his phone, with a puzzled look on his face, and said with some doubt. Although I am abroad, the signal here should be good. Hey, your phone is fine? Kin's mother stared at the phone in Kin's father's hand, and there was some surprise in her eyes. But then, she suddenly thought of something and said with some dissatisfaction. You don't answer the phone when you have a phone. What do you want to do? Kin's father heard this, but he didn't know whether to laugh or cry, and he cried out in grievance. Didn't you hear you say that the call couldn't be connected? Can't get through. Kin's mother also remembered what her son said just now, took out her phone with some suspicion, and continued to dial. Hey, I really can't get through. Putting down the phone, Kin's mother looked at her son, wanting to see what he would say. Mom, don't look at me, I don't understand either. Kinzu shrugged. He didn't lie. He really didn't understand this thing. Just when everyone was a little confused and was about to take apart the phone and try a new one, the curious voice of the younger sister Kinru came over again with a hint of liveliness. Could it be that you were out of money? No money? Yes, no money. Kinru nodded decisively. Impossible. Kin's father hesitated. He thought for a while and then said, when I came, there seemed to be more than 200 yuan in the mobile phone card, enough for several months. This everyone couldn't help but fall into silence again. Isn't this wrong? At this moment, Kinzu seemed to suddenly remember something, looked up at his mother, and asked, Mom, how much money was in your phone when you came? It seems to be more than 500. Kin's mother was also a little unsure. There was no way. Who told her not to pay attention to these things? Mom, give me your phone. Kinzu reached out and took the phone from his mother and started to fiddle with it. A minute later, Kinzu looked at the text message on his phone and couldn't help laughing. Mom, don't make blind guesses. Dad's phone must have been shut down due to unpaid bills, so you can't get through. No way. Kin's father didn't quite believe his son's judgment and couldn't help muttering. I still have more than 200 phone bills, how could it be shut down just like that? Kinzu shrugged helplessly and handed his mother's phone over with a smile. Here, take a look for yourself. Chapter 797 A depressed girl who wants to cry. Looking at the content displayed on the text message, Kin's father hadn't said anything yet, but Kin's mother jumped up first. Xiao Yu, what's going on? Where's my money? It turned out that the phone, which should have more than 500 yuan to spend, now only had more than 50 yuan left. I know. Kinru seemed to have thought of something, and jumped up with a look of joy. Brother, is it because Martin called Dad and spent all the money on Dad's expenses, so the call can't be connected? You dead girl, stay away. Kin's mother slapped her little daughter on the back of her head in annoyance, and said with some heartache, I just made a call for a short time, how could it cost hundreds of yuan? Mom, don't you know that when you call domestically from abroad, it's all roaming? Rubbing her little head, Kinru muttered a little aggrieved. Ah? Really? Kin's mother was a little dazed, and her eyes drifted to Kinzu involuntarily. Well, yes, not only yours will be deducted, but also Dad's. Kinzu smiled and handed the phone back, and stood up from the sofa. Okay, since Dad is fine and everything has been sorted out, I should go cook. I'm starving. It would have been better if he didn't say anything. After Kinzu said this, the other people also felt their stomachs growling. At this time, it was obviously too late to make a big meal. Kinzu didn't waste that effort, but directly stir-fried beef with green peppers and cooked noodles. While eating the fragrant noodles in the bowl, Sister Kinru pouted a little dissatisfied. Brother, you just give me this to eat. Didn't you say you came to America to make delicious food for me? Of course there are delicious foods. I don't have time to make them at noon. Listening to his sister's complaints, Kinzu couldn't help laughing. While eating noodles to fill his stomach, he asked, "Come on, tell me what you want to eat, and I'll make it for you tonight." Really? Kinru's big eyes lit up, and she immediately put down her bowl and chopsticks, counting her fingers and talking. "I want to eat baked lobster, steamed hairy crab, steamed turbot, braised sea bass, and that bluefin tuna. I heard that this kind of fish is very precious." At this point, the little girl stretched out her pink tongue to lick her lips, revealing a very greedy look. Unfortunately, her excitement did not last long, and was killed by her mother's chopsticks. "You're the only one who's always bothering me. You want a lobster? I think you look like a lobster." Her fantasy was interrupted by her mother. The little girl puffed up her cheeks in anger, and her appearance of being bullied made everyone laugh. After laughing, Kinzu put down his bowl and chopsticks and wiped his mouth. "Okay, everything else is fine, but you may not be able to eat bluefin tuna." "Why?" Hearing Kinzu's words, Kinru was happy at first and stopped pouting, but then she became a little confused. It's not that she wanted to eat bluefin tuna, but she was very curious why everything else was okay, but this one was not. Kinzu did not disappoint her. After lying comfortably on the sofa and burping, he explained with a smile, "That thing is only allowed to be hunted from September to November. Although there are still some in my restaurant, there are none on the ranch." Seeing that the little girl seemed a little disappointed, Kinzu sat up and added with a smile, "Besides, that thing is not delicious. Anyway, I can't get used to the taste." "Oh, that's it." The little girl was not very disappointed. After responding, her big eyes began to roll around. "What bad ideas are you up to, girl?" When Kinzu saw her look, he knew that this girl must be up to something again, and he reached out and hit her in annoyance. "No way, don't hit people on the head all the time, it will make them stupid." Covering her little head, Kinru felt like crying but had no tears. Why do these couples in her family like to hit her head? Okay, let's not hit each other on the head anymore." Kinzu smiled and waved his hand, looking very easy to talk to. Just when the little girl thought that her brother was the best, she heard Kinzu continue, "In the future, if you want to spank me, just take off my pants and spank my butt." Before the voice fell, Kinru's little face was already red with shame, and she rushed towards Kinzu. "I'll beat you to death, let you talk nonsense, let you talk nonsense." "No, little sister, you just said you don't want to hit my head." Out the brother and sister played around for a while, and Kinru let go of Kinzu with a red face, and complained to Zumengyo, who was still watching the show with a smile on the side. "Sister-in-law, you have to take good care of my brother in the future, always bullying others." Zumengyo was sitting on the sofa on the other side, watching the fun and laughing with Kin's mother. Hearing this, she smiled and said, "It's okay, anyway, it's others who are bullied, not you. Why should I care about these things?" Rolling her eyes in frustration, Kinru pouted her little mouth and came to Zumengyo, pulling her arm and acting coquettishly. Especially the one who called her sister-in-law all the time, which made the beautiful Zu so happy that she signed a lot of unequal treaties without knowing what was going on. Well, the most important one was aimed at Kinzu. For example, when Kinru wanted to eat something, Kinzu had to make it for her unconditionally. For another example, when Kinru wanted to go out to play, Kinzu had to take her out to play unconditionally. Anyway, Kinzu was gnashing his teeth while listening to her, and thought to himself, "Yo, this girl deserves to be punished." She was fooled by a few words. "Let's see how I will punish you tonight." The beautiful Zu, who was chatting with her sister-in-law, seemed to sense something. She turned her head and saw Kinzu's malicious eyes, and she couldn't help feeling a little weak in her heart. Especially when she heard her sister-in-law scolding her brother and wanted to sign another unequal treaty, she reacted immediately. "Well, bruh." The beautiful Zu narrowed her eyes into a slit and put her arm around her sister-in-law's shoulders in an intimate manner. What? Kinru seemed to have discovered something was wrong at this time. "Well." The beautiful Zu had a pretty face. She looked at Kinzu behind her and said with a smile, "We just said that we should listen to your brother's opinion. After all, we're democratic and free now, right? Listen to his opinion." Kinru's face was frowned, and she looked at the beautiful Zu with some frustration, thinking, if he can agree, then hell. It was not until this time that she suddenly realized that her silly and cute sister-in-law seemed to have grown two small horns on her forehead, and was looking at her with a smirk. It seemed to mean, "Little girl, I accept the sugar coating, you can move the shells back by yourself." Chapter 798. Xiaobai almost got into trouble. The winter sun shines on people, giving them a warm feeling, making Qin Zhu, who was lying under the pergola, feel a little sleepy. Ah, so boring. Qin Zhu stretched lazily, took a sip of the tea next to him, and looked at the group of people laughing and playing not far away, feeling a little helpless. He originally wanted to take these guys out to sea in the afternoon, but his father was not satisfied with riding horses, so he dragged the whole family to go riding with him. Go, Tongton rode her pony, bypassed the white tiger who was also basking in the sun, and came to her uncle. "Uncle, why don't you go riding a horse?" The little girl sat on the pure black pony, holding the reins with one hand, but wanted to reach out with the other hand to pull Qin Zhu to ride the big horse together. But in the end, her little hand was grasped by Qin Zhu, and then the little girl felt her body lighten, and then she fell into a warm embrace. "Ha, uncle, you are so awesome." The little girl was not frightened by the sudden attack, but giggled. "Why didn't you go play with Lei?" Holding the little girl, Qin Zhu looked at Lei not far away. He saw that the little guy was riding his pony, swaying behind his father to join in the fun. "No." The little girl pouted her mouth in dissatisfaction. "Lei always doesn't wait for me, I don't want to play with him." As she said, the little girl looked up at Qin Zhu and said coquettishly, "Uncle, can you take me to ride a horse together?" Hearing the little girl's tender voice, Qin Zhu felt that his heart was about to melt, and he nodded and agreed hurriedly. "Okay, let's go. Uncle will take you to ride a big horse, and we won't take Lei to play." "Well, we won't take him to play." The little girl nodded her head vigorously, kicking her legs in Qin Zhu's arms, looking very excited. With some effort, Qin Zhu carried the not-so-obedient little girl in his arms and came to the stable and opened the compartment that belonged to him. As soon as the compartment doors opened, a cheerful neighing of a horse sounded in Qin Zhu's ears. "Wow, what a beautiful horse!" Tongton, who was standing not far away, looked at the big horse led out by her uncle and couldn't help clapping her hands excitedly. "Isn't it beautiful?" Qin Zhu gently stroked Xiaobai's somewhat silky mane and smiled softly. "Little guy, I haven't seen you for so long, have you missed me?" As if responding to Qin Zhu's question, Xiaobai, who had just walked out of the stable, stood up and neighed loudly. Not far away, several people who were leisurely riding horses also heard the neighing. At first, they didn't care, but just wondered what kind of horse could neigh so loudly. But when the horses under their crotches began to become a little restless, several people felt that something was wrong. Did Xiaoxiu go over there just now? Father Qin was riding on his own quarter horse, which was covered with satin black hair, and he looked curiously at the stable not far away. There seemed to be a very powerful horse about to appear. "Yes, I seem to have seen Xiaoxiu go there." Mother Qin, sitting on another red quarter horse, echoed with some uncertainty. Unlike Father Qin's love for horses, Mother Qin was just a little curious about horses and had no special desire to ride a horse. For example, now, after saying this, Mother Qin carefully turned over and got off the horse, standing aside and watching. Zhu Mengyo, who was standing aside, seemed to have thought of something and explained with a smile. "Uncle, Aunt, this should be Qin Zhu's Fergana horse." Fergana horse? In an instant, except for the two foreigners Eva and Dale, everyone else's eyes were focused on Zhu Mengyo. "Oh, right, it's the pure white horse, right." Little sister Qinru seemed to have remembered something and shouted loudly. Zhu Mengyo nodded and said with a smile, "Yes, it's the pure white Fergana horse." "What pure white?" Qin's father and mother turned their eyes back to the little girl. Why did she know when they didn't? "Dad, my brother has posted photos on Penguin before." As she said that, the little girl took out her mobile phone and clicked a few times quickly. In an instant, in the surprised eyes of Qin's father and mother, a snow-white horse that seemed to be the snow on the Himalayas that never melted for thousands of years appeared in front of the two elders' limb. In particular, this photo was taken when the sun was rising, so it seemed to have a halo. Just when everyone fell into silence and confusion, they heard another loud neighing from not far away. "Shilulu." Along with this neighing, a group of white clouds quickly floated out from the luxurious stable. Yes, it seemed to float out. Before everyone could react, the group of white clouds had already come to everyone's side and stopped steadily. It was not until this time that a scream was heard. The little girl who was held in Qin Zhu's arms and sitting in front of him was excited and surprised. She seemed to be very curious about how she suddenly appeared here. "Wow, brother, you're really beautiful." The few people who were just immersed in that photo also looked up in surprise, especially the little sister, who screamed and wanted to rush to Qinziu. But who knew that even with two people, one big and one small, on the horse's back, Xiaobai's movements were still so fast. Just when Qinru screamed and wanted to rush up, Xiaobai suddenly turned around, and one of his front hooves was already raised high. Ah, be careful. Although Qinru screamed loudly, it was a pity that it was still a little late. Seeing that the horse hoof as big as a bowl was about to fall on Qinru's pale face, Qinziu suddenly stood up on the horse's back and forcibly lifted the horse's head to change its position. You dead thing, if you don't listen to me again, I will kill you and make soup. Although the direction of the horse's hoof was changed in time, Qinziu, Qinru who escaped the disaster, or the Qin family members who were dazed on the sight, all felt very scared. If the hoof had been aimed at that little face, not to mention the disfigurement, it would be a question whether she could survive. Look at you, you are so old, but still so crazy, and you are not decent at all. Mother Qin was a little scared, and she stepped forward and hugged the little girl who was still a little dazed. Although she complained, her face could not hide her concern. Being hugged by Mother Qin, Qinru seemed to come back to her senses at this time. Feeling her mother's care, the little girl could no longer suppress the grievance in her heart, and burst into tears. Wow, I was scared to death. Si est escuchando esta novela en un canal distinto a mundo fanfic novelas, significat lo descarga and y subir en cines fuerzos invitamos cordialmente a visitar nuestro canal. Mundo fanfic novelas all encontrar la versión original de esta historia y podrás explorar muchas otras novelas de diversos narradores. Te esperamos para sumergirte en un mundo de novelas incredibles. Chapter 799. Preparing to go to sea. The north wind howled, and the waves surged. On the endless seashore, there was a green shade of trees. Even though it was the cold winter, those evergreen trees still stubbornly showed their vitality. In that large villa wrapped in green, which was decorated very luxuriously, it was busy at the moment. The gentle sunlight peeped in through the huge floor-to-ceiling glass, and it seemed to have discovered a lazy guy. Since she was almost knocked down by Xiaobai's hoof, Qinru basically avoided it these days. Oh, no. It should be said that the little girl was scared. No matter which horse she saw, she avoided it. She was afraid that these guys would suddenly go crazy and give her a blow. After all, her brother couldn't protect her all the time. Speaking of her brother, Qinru's big eyes were full of little stars. In her mind now, her brother stood up on the horse's back that day, holding the reins with both hands. It was really cool. What are you doing, little girl? Come and pack your things. Just as the little girl was curled up on the sofa, watching TV and thinking about random things, her mother's voice suddenly rang in her ears. Oh, here I come. Coming back to her senses, the little girl stuck out her pink little tongue, put on her slips and ran upstairs. Today, her brother promised her to go to the sea, and she has been looking forward to it for a long time. In particular, those seafood feasts that make her drool at the thought of it make the little girl feel that she can't wait any longer. While everyone in the villa was busy packing up, Qinziu was bored and dazed at the dock. Well, yes, he was dazed. The preparations were actually very simple, or rather, the division of labor arranged by all was very reasonable. As soon as he gave an order, those who were repairing the machines repaired the machines, those who were preparing the fishing nets prepared the fishing nets, those who were refueling the oil, and those who were preparing fresh water prepared fresh water. There was someone in charge of everything, but he himself was idle. In fact, he had decided to go to sea a few days ago. But he knew that the weather was not good. After that day, the next few days were either howling north winds or light rains. If the temperature was not still so low, Qinziu would even think that the spring rain had arrived early. Fortunately, it finally cleared up in the past 2 days, and the wind and waves on the sea were also very respectful, not too big. Ding-ling-ling. A rapid phone ring rang, interrupting Qinziu's endless thoughts and bringing him back to his senses from his empty state. Retracting his gaze from the distance, Qinziu reached out and took out his mobile phone, looked at it and picked it up. Hi, Brother Chen, what's the matter? Crossing his legs, Qinziu leaned against the side of the boat, looking at the slightly undulating sea, with a very relaxed expression. Boss, I heard that you were going to go out to sea today. On the other end of the phone, Chen Mu's voice was a little excited, and he seemed to be looking forward to it. Qinziu turned his head to look at Wu, who was repairing the radar beside him, curled his lips and asked, I say, Brother Chen, do you have to be so well informed? Aha, that, Chen Mu laughed and teased. We call this telepathy, isn't it? Get out. Listening to the guy talking nonsense, Kinzu couldn't help but shudder, and scolded with a smile. If you have anything to say, just tell me. If you don't, I'll hang up the phone myself, and you still say that you have telepathy. Your sister and I are almost the same. Ha ha, boss, I don't have a sister, but I have a brother. How about that? Chenmu also laughed twice, but he also knew that jokes should be stopped at an appropriate time, so he immediately brought the topic back. Boss, you know, we are going to open a new store, and we have to solve the supply problem first. What do you think? Well, that's right. Kinzu nodded subconsciously, and then he felt something was wrong. He suddenly came to his senses and asked suspiciously, I say, Brother Chen, do you have a new goal? Chenmu did not deny it, but smiled and said, this is not urgent. Let's do the preparation work first. For example, for this ballet now, we haven't completed the supply of ingredients yet. This. Kinzu touched his nose awkwardly. He neglected this point. Oh, he forgot about this store after the new year. Okay, I understand. I will try to prepare more good seafood for you. Kinzu sighed helplessly, and felt that he was really destined to be a hard worker. After hanging up the phone, Kinzu touched his chin and thought for a while, and called out the system again. System, I remember that only the fish species recognized by the system will not leave the fishing ground, right? After a long silence, the system voice that had not been heard for a long time rang again. That's not the case. All the newly put in fish fry after taking over the fishing ground will not leave the fishing ground after a period of feeding. Kinzu was happy to hear this, and just as he was about to speak, he thought something was wrong. After carefully recalling the system's words in his mind, Kinzu hurriedly asked, System, this period of feeding? How long is that? Not necessarily. The system seemed to be a little stuck, and finally said, some only need 1 day, while others need a month. It depends on the rarity of the fish species and their health status. Kinzu nodded, not quite understanding, and did not speak again, but thought about his own things in his mind. Boss, everything is ready, you can get on the boat. While he was thinking, Will's abrupt voice rang in Kinzu's ears, almost scaring him. Turning his head, Kinzu stared at the guy in front of him, his eyes turned, and he smiled and said, well, Will, Chenmu just called and said that the restaurant is in urgent need of a batch of high-end seafood. Today it all depends on you. What? Will was a little confused, he even thought if he had heard it wrong. If he could always get high-end seafood, would he still need to work here? You know, as long as he could get a boatload of high-end seafood, he wouldn't have to work for several years. However, looking at the expression on his boss's face, Will knew that there must be room for redemption. Sure enough, when everyone was busy making the final preparations, Kinzu came in front of him and snorted softly. Will, you have to know that the boss's whereabouts cannot be easily disclosed. Yes, boss. Will wiped the cold sweat from his forehead and responded with a wry smile. Boss, I really didn't mean it. I just mentioned it casually when we were chatting. Kinzu waved his hand and said with a smile, this is not important now. I'm talking about the future. My whereabouts in the future can't be disclosed to others casually. Chapter 800. Get used to it. It would have been better if he hadn't said it. Kinzu was actually shocked when he said that. You know, he has a lot of enemies now. If those guys find out his whereabouts and ambush him on the way, that would be a big deal. The more Kinzu thought about it, the more unsafe he felt. He glanced around the fishing boat and couldn't help but frown. He originally wanted to get the helicopter over and put it on the deck as a backup. But after looking at the deck, Kinzu felt that it seemed a little unreliable. It seems that I have to change to a bigger fishing boat. Kinzu muttered to himself, turned around, and walked towards the villa in Will's surprised eyes. Is it necessary to change the fishing boat? Will took his eyes away from Kinzu who was walking away, put down the things in his hand, glanced at the two fishing boats docked at the dock, and couldn't help scratching his head. It seems that after this thing comes, except for accompanying Kinzu to go out to sea a few times, it has no use, right? Fishing? It doesn't exist. After coming to the fishery, they basically didn't do anything. Oh, of course, occasionally accompanying their boss out is not their job. Not to mention Will's endless sighs here, Kinzu was frightened by the scene in front of him after returning to the villa. Dad, Mom, what are you doing? Pointing to the ground, the large and small bags piled up into a small mounting, Kinzu's forehead was covered with cold sweat. These are all luggage. Kin's mother's matter-of-fact answer made Kinzu finally powerless and collapsed on his sofa. Mom, we are going out to sea, not to travel. Kinzu sighed softly, lying on the sofa, and explained weakly. The food and drinks are already on the boat, Mom. You only need 2 sets of clothes to change. At this point, Kinzu turned his head, looked at the few people and said with a smile. In fact, you don't need to bring anything at all. It's winter, and you don't need to change clothes. Ah, is that so? Kin's mother was a little embarrassed when she heard it. She looked at the pile of things on the ground and didn't know how to choose. I told you, it's not like we're going out to do anything. Kin's father muttered at the side at this time. Obviously, he was still a little depressed that his initial words were ignored. Just when he started to pack up, he said that he only needed to pack 2 sets of clothes. Unfortunately, his words were ignored by the excited Kin's mother and the others. Okay, Mom, pack 2 sets of clothes quickly, and don't bring anything else. Seeing that Kin's mother wanted to refute a few more words, Kinzu quickly waved his hand to stop her, and said with a smile. There are also these toothpaste and toothbrushes. You don't need to bring these things, they are all on the boat. There are these too. Kin's mother was a little surprised, but still nodded, indicating that she knew. Seeing everyone busy packing things, Kinzu pouted at the beautiful ladies Yu, and the two ended upstairs together. The beautiful ladies Yu had just returned from the town to purchase, and they hadn't had time to pack their own things. Taking 2 sets of clothes, some necessary seasonings and meat, Kinzu led a group of people to the boat. The blue waves were rippling, and the sea and the sky were connected. When Kinzu's family arrived at the dock, they looked at the seemingly endless sea in the distance with their own eyes, and they all felt a sense of shock. Wow, it's so beautiful. Kinru was a child at heart. After the initial shock, she ran to the dock with cheers. But halfway through, when her little feet stepped on the soft sand, she was attracted by the golden and soft sand. She bent down involuntarily, stretched out her white and tender little hands, scooped up a handful of fine sand, and let it slip through her fingers. Kinru's bright little face was full of joyful smiles. Brother, your beach is so beautiful. Of course, you know the golden beach, right? It's mine. Kinzu tightened a shoulder bag on his back and watched his sister playing there with a smile on his face. Although the fishing boats are ready now, nothing can compare to the happiness of his family, right? However, Kinru didn't know what her brother was thinking, but was very dissatisfied with his answer just now. TSK, the little girl rolled her eyes at her brother, pouted her lips, and said with contempt, Brother, don't bully me for not knowing. The golden beach is in Hawaii, okay? Kinzu touched his nose awkwardly, but the smile on his face did not disappear, but became stronger and stronger. My place is also called the Golden Beach. If you don't believe me, ask it. Who to ask? The little girl looked confused. It. Kinzu stretched his hand down and pointed to the small beach. Get out of my way. A feeling of being treated as a fool by her brother came up spontaneously. The little girl couldn't help it anymore and rushed towards Kinzu. Unfortunately, her height was not even as high as Kinzu's chest. How could she be his opponent? Before she touched him, she was picked up by Kinzu, and walked towards the boat with a laugh. Kin's father and Kin's father watched from the side, and the smiles on their faces never disappeared. Children and grandchildren, family happiness, is probably what the two old people pursue in their lives. Hearing her little daughter screaming for help, Kin's mother followed her with a smile and joked. Little girl, let's see if you are going to mess with your brother again. No. Brother, I don't dare to do that anymore. The little girl was held horizontally in front of Kinzu's chest. She felt very uncomfortable in this position and begged for mercy in a coquettish voice. Just put me down. I won't dare to mess with you anymore. Hearing the little girl's delicate begging for mercy, Kinzu immediately felt goosebumps all over his body and quickly put the little girl down. Be quiet and don't talk in that voice for a while. Why? Kinru stared at her brother with dissatisfaction. Why did he even control my speech? Kinzu ignored her at all and strode directly onto the boat. After entering the warm cabin, he teased with a smile on his face. Little sister, other people act like a spoiled child just to ask for money, but when you act like a spoiled child, it's your life. Kinzu. The little girl, who was a little angry and embarrassed, almost couldn't help but pounce on him again. It was not until she saw Kinzu's raised hands and thought about how she was being lifted up and down just now that she suppressed her anger and turned to look at her mother. Mom, look at my brother, he has been bullying me all the time, and you don't say anything to him. Although Kin's mother heard her little daughter's complaints, she didn't have time to pay attention to her, and responded casually. It's okay, you were bullied a lot when you were a child anyway, you'll get used to it. Thanks to Sankan for the reward and support. Fin DS capture much as greaters peluga hasta el final. No se olviden de dar like busgasms contenido exclusivo y exeo inmediato. Suscríbete nuestro Patreon. Recuerda, cada like, suscripción dona que nos anima a continuar. Greaters a todos nos vemos en el próximo video.